The Night in the Great World of American TV Series. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 151, War in Progress. Time is the most terrifying thing in the world. It can make everything deteriorate, decay and perish. It can also make everything from nothing to prosperity. It can also turn the sea into mulberry fields and the mountains into valleys. Nothing can remain unchanged in front of it. Nothing can stop time from surging forward. The world will not stop because of the departure of one person. Kai's disappearance did not stop everything. The world continues, and people and things continue. But as time goes by, everything that has happened has become a legend, and the legend seems extremely pale and powerless in the face of time. The legend will change dramatically according to the different times. For example, Arthur became King Arthur, and then became a legendary story famous throughout the world, but the background of the times has changed. The original Celtic legend became a typical Christian story after Christianity was introduced to Great Britain. The relationship between the characters has changed greatly. For example, Arthur's uncle Tristan became a member of the Knights of the Round Table in the subsequent legend. For example, in the legend of King Arthur, Arthur became a wild child. He was taken away by Merlin at birth and given to Kay's father, Sir Ector, for adoption. Then there was the sword in the stone, and the one who pulled out the sword was the king. Of course, there are some things that have never changed, such as King Arthur, who is still a man of great talent and strategy, but ended tragically, being cheated on by his own knight and stabbed to death by his own son. Another example is Kay, King Arthur's sworn brother, who still has a high status in the legend. It was he who helped King Arthur stabilize the situation and sit on the throne. It was also he who killed the dragon and saved King Arthur. In the end, it was his heroic death that allowed King Arthur to win the war and unify England. This is my compilation, and K cannot be too much of a soy sauce in the legend. In short, although time has preserved some things, it still changes the past beyond recognition. Maybe in a few years, King Arthur will become a quilt king, a woman, or even a cold-faced queen with a great figure. Who knows? Fortunately, even after countless years, at least they have not been forgotten. Time came to the beginning of the 20th century. The saddest thing about human beings is that no matter how they evolve, they cannot resist the factory settings in their DNA. They love to create, but they are also keen on destruction. They are always in a cycle of self-destruction after development. It is still the same today. In the late 19th century and early 1920s, the world was unprecedentedly prosperous, and the invention of the steam engine set off an industrial revolution. The railway brought Europe closer together. It only took a few days for people to get from the Atlantic coast to the Strait of Istanbul. Distance was no longer a problem. As long as you dare to imagine, everything seems possible. People are excited about the convenience brought by technology. The future is so bright and beautiful, and it seems that everything is under control. People did not realize that reality would be so cruel until the summer of 1914. On June 28, 1914, Serbia's National Day, Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife, the heir to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, were shot and killed by Serbian youth Gavrilo Princip while inspecting Sarajevo. Then the war began. Before this, no one thought that the death of a crown prince would drag the whole world into a huge disaster. You must know that before the war, the rulers of several major belligerent countries were relatives. Many people thought that the assassination of the crown prince this time would end with mediation and negotiations among various countries. Unfortunately, things did not go as planned. On July 28 of the same year, with the support of Germany, the Austro-Hungarian Empire declared war on Serbia on the pretext of the Sarajevo incident. Immediately afterwards, Russia declared war on Austria-Hungary. Germany also immediately declared war on Russia, and then the two major military groups of the Allies and the Central Powers went to war. The beginning of the war was beyond everyone's expectations, and the process was even more so. No one would have thought that the war would be so tragic and so long. The war broke out in 1914. In that year, the German army first launched a large-scale offensive on the Western Front, according to the Schlieffen Plan formulated before the war. Due to the fierce resistance of the British, French and Belgian armies in the Marne River and other battles and the Russian army's offensive on the Eastern Front, the German army's plan for a quick victory failed. The two sides fighting on the Western Front built trenches, confronted each other for a long time, and turned to positional warfare. In the next 2 years, the death toll on both sides of the war exceeded the expectations of the countries themselves, and the two major military groups began to seek ways to end the war. In 1916, Germany first launched a plan to break the deadlock. In this year, Erich von Ludendorff was appointed the first military supply director by Kaiser Wilhelm II, a position equivalent to the deputy chief of staff, and was promoted to general of infantry in the same year. In secret, Ludendorff actually led a secret force, a biological and chemical force, and was determined to use biological and chemical weapons to reverse the passive war situation of the German army. In the same year, there were 3 large-scale land battles in this year, namely the Battle of Verdun and the Battle of the Somme on the Western Front and the summer offensive of the Russian army on the Eastern Front, Brusilov offensive. At sea, after the Battle of Jutland, Britain still firmly controlled the command of the sea. This year was also regarded as a decisive year by both sides of the war. It was also on such a stage that Ludendorff and his Vipers came into everyone's sight. Various terrible biological and chemical weapons began to show their power in the war, and the Allies suffered heavy losses. If it were just this, the Allies could still resist. After all, although biological and chemical weapons are powerful, they cannot play a decisive role. At most, they can prepare more gas masks. What really makes the Allies feel difficult is the special forces led by Ludendorff. They come and go without a trace. Every time they appear on the battlefield, they will kill the enemy in a whirlwind. According to the reports of the frontline soldiers, they call these people demons. They don't shoot bullets, move quickly and secretly, and some soldiers even claim to see them sucking the blood of the enemy. In short, the impact is very bad. Of course, what's worse is that until July 1916, for a full 6 months, the Allies were at a loss for them. They have never captured these special operations team members once, and they don't even have corpses. However, this situation improved in early October. With the help of an American spy, Steve Trevor, the Allies brought back a super soldier, Diana Prince. The soldiers on the front line prefer to call her Wonder Woman. From July, when she joined the Allied camp, to September, she and a British Special Forces unit started a 2-month battle with Ludendorff's Vipers Special Forces. In terms of the record, Ms. Diana should be considered to have the upper hand. However, in late September, Steve and Diana received an order from the Allied Joint Command to secretly retreat to the British Isles. According to their contact, Sir Patrick, the head of the British MI6, they will carry out a secret mission personally ordered by the royal family. The content of the mission is absolutely confidential, and even he, the head of MI6, is not qualified to know. He is only responsible for taking them to the residence of the royal teacher, Reverend Dalton. He knows nothing else and is even asked to forget all the details of the mission. Chapter 152 Gentlemen. Steve and Diana were secretly arranged by Sir Patrick to enter Westminster Abbey, which can be said to be one of the symbols of the United Kingdom. After its completion, it hosted major ceremonies such as the King's coronation, royal weddings, and state funerals. All previous monarchs and some great men were buried in Westminster Abbey. It can be said that Westminster Abbey is a stone history book of the British royal family. Diana visited it when she first came to London. After Sir Patrick handed them over to an Anglican priest, he left directly without any stop. After that, the Anglican priest took Diana and the two into the interior of Westminster Abbey. During this period, the priest, like Sir Patrick, kept silent and had no communication with them throughout the whole process. Such a weird atmosphere made Diana, a warrior, a little uncomfortable. She was a warrior, not an agent or a spy. She didn't like this mysterious and secretive style of doing things. So on the way, Diana wanted to communicate with the priest several times, but was stopped by Steve. Steve himself is a spy and is quite familiar with secret work. He knows that since the headquarters would go to great lengths to transfer them back from the front line and then secretly bring them here, there must be a top secret mission. For such a mission, confidentiality will naturally be very strict. Instead of asking questions here, it is better to let things take their course and wait until they know it. Westminster Abbey is very large, so large that Diana and her friends walked for 10 minutes and still did not reach their destination. Finally, Diana could not help it and whispered to Steve, "Steve, what do they want us to do?" Steve looked ahead a little embarrassedly and found that the priest who led the way did not notice them. Then he whispered to Diana, "Hey, Diana, can't you wait and talk?" This is very rude. Steve was also a little helpless about Diana's personality. Although Diana is now dressed maturely, intellectually and charmingly, her personality is actually quite simple, even a little childish. Usually, Steve likes Diana's personality very much. After all, in this turbulent world, few people can maintain their original innocence. But sometimes, he was extremely troubled. For example, Diana's values were very different from theirs. Steve was a spy, so he naturally couldn't be a great and glorious figure. As secret workers, their daily lives were about exchanging interests, lies, and betrayal. In short, everything he did was for the benefit of the country, and personal ideas of good and evil were irrelevant. But Diana was different. She always adhered to the purest concept of good and evil. She would not do anything that violated her dignity as a soldier just to strike the enemy, and she would not ignore the most basic concept of good and evil just for the sake of interests. Such people were extremely rare on the battlefield. Steve always believed that both sides of the war were beasts, and they wanted nothing more than victory. But Diana always believed that a soldier was a soldier. They could go to the battlefield for honor, but they could never abandon the dignity and principles of a soldier for victory. In short, they worked together for almost 3 months. Although the cooperation was generally smooth, there were constant conflicts in many aspects. This was not a personal grudge, but a collision of two values. However, despite this, Steve still liked this girl from the bottom of his heart, and he admired her straightforwardness and innocence. Because there are very few people like her in this world. Well, I just hope we can complete this damn mission quickly. We need to get back to the battlefield quickly. I can feel that we are getting closer and closer to Ares. Maybe as long as we catch that Ludendorff, we can find Ares. The reason why Diana left her hometown, Paradise Island, was to hunt down the last god of Olympus, the god of war Ares. Diana always believed that it was because of the god of war Ares that this unprecedented war broke out. As long as he is caught or killed, then this world that has been dragged into the quagmire of war can be saved. Okay, we will go back as soon as possible. Be patient, Diana, Steve said a little perfunctorily. Although it was Steve who brought Diana out of Paradise Island and he had seen the magic of that island, he still doubted the so-called god of war Ares, and he didn't believe that it was the god of war Ares that caused the outbreak of this war. This is obviously the fault of the Germans. Ares, the god of war, is obviously Greek. However, since Paradise Island and Diana insisted on this, he didn't seem to need to correct this. After all, they regarded the German as the god of war Ares, which was not bad. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Although Steve is an American, he is still very familiar with the British. While talking here, they arrived at their destination. They came to the Catholic Benedictine monastery on the south side of the church. It is a square courtyard surrounded by open arcades, and there are many ancillary buildings around the arcades. In addition, there is a treasury hall and an underground chapel on the southeast side of the monastery courtyard. Their goal is the underground chapel. It is a rectangular hall, now a monastery museum, which displays statues of kings, queens and nobles placed in uncovered coffins during funerals for people to pay tribute. When they arrived here, they found that someone was already waiting in the chapel of the chapel. There were 4 people in total, 3 men and 1 woman. Among the 3 men, there was an old man with white hair and beard, a middle-aged man with a big beard like an Indian, and a well-dressed gentleman. The last woman was the most conspicuous. Although she was wearing a widow's outfit and even her face was covered by a black veil, these still couldn't block her amazing charm. But at this time, Steve no longer had the heart to care about the woman. He just stared at the old gentleman with white hair and beard, with disbelief on his face. This is impossible. Impossible, how could it be? Steve's gaffe quickly attracted the attention of others, but what was interesting was that these people showed friendly smiles when they saw Steve, as if they saw an acquaintance. This was indeed the case. After seeing Steve, the well-dressed middle-aged gentleman immediately smiled and said, "Captain Nemo, you lose. Our magical boy didn't draw his gun as soon as he came in. You owe me 20 pounds now." The Indian, known as Captain Nemo, didn't care about the gentleman's teasing, but greeted Steve politely. "Hello again, wonderful boy." Although in this era, the West generally looked down on Indians, believing them to be ignorant and backward. But the Captain Nemo in front of him was different. He looked old-fashioned, polite and arrogant, very much like an English gentleman. His firm and calm eyes seemed to reflect profound thoughts. His upright posture made him look extremely tall and oppressive at his height of 1.7 meters. Even though he greeted Steve very kindly, the overwhelming force could not be concealed. Steve seemed much more rude. He did not look at Nemo, but continued to stare at the old gentleman. Chapter 153 Old Friends Reunion. Hey, boy, do you want an old man like me to come over and give you a hug? The old man smiled at Steve, his eyes revealing kindness. They hadn't seen each other for 7 years since they last defeated the ghost party. The once childish and magical boy has grown into a real gentleman. Steve heard the old man's words and finally confirmed that this was really Alan Cortman, the great explorer who was once famous all over the world, Cortman who was known as the Immortal. Diana was a little confused as she watched Steve hug the old man excitedly, crying and laughing. In Diana's impression, Steve could barely be considered a warrior. Although he was not as good as the Amazon warriors, he was already good by men's standards. He was very calm and rarely showed his emotions. This was the first time Diana saw such a weak look. Soon Cortman and Steve restrained their emotions. A gentleman is not a sissy who likes to cry. What matters is calmness and restraint. Cortman, I thought you were dead. We buried you with our own hands. How come? After confirming that the person in front of him was really Cortman, Steve couldn't help asking the reason. In the Arctic, he saw Cortman die with his own eyes. He and others sent his body back to South Africa and buried it there. Steve arranged everything in the process and there would be no mistakes. But Cortman was standing in front of him alive. Steve was very curious about what happened in the process. Cortman was not as excited as Steve. Cortman came back to life a long time ago, but he had lost the passion for adventure and just wanted to live a peaceful life. So he didn't contact his old friends, let alone Steve. He just lived in seclusion in Africa quietly. In his life, he had pursued everything he should pursue and lost everything he should lose. He didn't want to toss. If it weren't for the fact that the things the British royal family took out this time were too amazing, he probably wouldn't have come out again. Looking at Steve's excitement and joy, Cortman was also filled with emotion. To be honest, he still felt a little guilty when he saw Steve at this moment. He originally agreed to live in seclusion, but he couldn't resist the temptation at the last minute. Now, it's meaningless to hide the news that he was still alive. Remember that I once received a blessing from a wizard of an African native tribe? Is it the rumor that as long as you are in African land, you will never die? Cortman was once called the Immortal. On the one hand, it was because Cortman had countless adventures in his life, but he was always able to turn danger into safety. Many situations that were bound to die were always safe and sound in his place, so he was called the Immortal. On the other hand, there was a rumor that Cortman had once adventured in Africa. At that time, white people colonized Africa and committed a lot of blood debts. Cortman couldn't stand these things. Once, a group of white adventurers killed a group of native tribes for the treasure. Cortman was not happy at the time, and he stood up and fought back the group of adventurers with the tribe and took back the treasure of the tribe. Then the wizard of the tribe gave Cortman this blessing. He was called the Son of Africa, and as long as he was on this hot land of Africa, he would never die. This incident caused a big stir. At that time, the British colonial authorities prosecuted Cortman for murder. White people always side with white people. Cortman was not afraid of it, so he sued them. In the end, the matter was brought to the British Supreme Court. In the end, Cortman was found not guilty under the ruling of the Supreme Court. This incident also caused an uproar in Britain at that time, so Cortman became completely famous, and many of his deeds were widely circulated. This made his title of Immortal have a sense of mystery. Isn't that a rumor? Steve knew this rumor a long time ago, and he once asked Cortman if it was true. Cortman answered him that the rumor was true, but as for whether the blessing was true, he didn't know, and he had never died. Now I know that the blessing is true. Well, the old man has died, so he knows that the blessing is really not nonsense. Really, Steve thought it was too fantasy. But soon he saw Diana on the side, and felt that it didn't seem to be a big deal. This girl is more exaggerated than Cortman. Isn't it more fantastic that she is invulnerable and powerful? Thinking of it this way, it is not unacceptable for Cortman to come back to life. After that, the two began to talk about the past, and later Captain Nemo and the middle-aged gentleman joined in. The gentleman's name was Hyde, Dr. Hyde. Only the lady had been sitting in the corner and didn't want to join their conversation. The other three people knew this tacitly, but Steve seemed a little guilty and never dared to look at the lady. In the end, Cortman felt a little embarrassed and took the initiative to pull the woman into their conversation. Unfortunately, the woman just looked at the men with disdain and turned her head away and ignored them. "Hey, Mina. I know you and Steve had a relationship, but that's in the past. And I don't mind." Cortman felt that he should be a peacemaker. Mina Harker, a vampire bride who was first embraced by Count Dracula himself. After Dracula was killed by Van Helsing, she became the queen of vampires, the one with the noblest bloodline among vampires. She is almost 200 years old now. Mina Harker's grace is unparalleled, and it is not an exaggeration to call her the most beautiful woman in Britain. She has a romantic personality, so she has experienced a lot of relationships. When he was young, Cortman flirted with Mina Harker, and succeeded. At that time, Mina Harker loved Cortman to death, and once thought about turning Cortman into a vampire. As a result, at the critical moment, Cortman refused. If it was just because he didn't want to abandon his human body, Mina Harker could understand it. But the problem is that Cortman, this old and dishonest man, not only rejected Mina Harker, but also fell in love with someone else. If it weren't for Van Helsing, who was still alive and mediated, Mina Harker would have sucked Cortman dry as fertilizer for flowers. Later, Mina also started a new relationship with the immortal handsome man Dorian Gray, and let go of Cortman. At least Cortman thought so. Humph. Men are not good. Of course, including you, Cortman. All the men fell silent for a while. Mina Harker was indeed qualified to say this. She had never met a reliable man in her life. When she was still a human, she fell in love with a young lawyer, Jonathan Harker, and got engaged. Then Jonathan left her for his career. At that time, Jonathan left to become Count Dracula's personal lawyer. As a result, he hurt others and himself. Not only was he imprisoned by Dracula and unable to escape, he also wrote a letter to lead Mina to Dracula. So there was the fate of Dracula and Mina. Later, Van Helsing took action and killed Dracula, and Dracula died in Mina's arms. These two relationships failed. Then she met Cortman, and failed again. Then there was the immortal handsome man Dorian Gray, but this guy was even more excessive. Not only did his relationship with Mina break down, but he also betrayed them in the ghost party incident. In the end, Mina killed him with her own hands. Another failure. After this incident, Steve, a young hunk, hooked up with Mina. Mina fell in love again. But soon, the two broke up because their values were too different and their worldviews were completely incompatible. It was a failure again. This relationship was really bumpy. Although Mina looked mature, beautiful, graceful, and like a veteran in love, in fact, she was the kind of person who always devoted herself to every relationship, and every time she wanted to get a good result, she would be bruised and battered. A group of men felt Mina's resentment and looked up at the sky. Among them, Steve and Cortman were the most embarrassed. But Diana on the side finally sensed something. "Is she your lover?" Steve was a little interested in Diana. Now he was asked about his ex-girlfriend, so he was even more embarrassed. He could only shrug and whispered. The relationship broke down. Chapter 154, The League of Gentlemen. This is not the first time Steve has come to Europe. As early as 1809, he was commissioned by the U.S. federal government to come to Europe to investigate a transnational terrorist attack. At that time, the United States was more of a bystander to understand the series of terrorist attacks that occurred in Europe. At that time, including the time point of the story, the United States did not have the status of a world policeman, let alone the foundation of a superpower after World War II. At best, it was just a marginal country. Although it was a big country, Europe looked down on them. So the United States did not intend to participate excessively. Steve was equivalent to an investigator or intelligence collector. As a result, Steve tracked down the Spectre Party by mistake, and then he and Cortman and his team, who were privately commissioned by the British Empire to investigate at that time. So after a while, Steve joined Cortman and his team to investigate the Spectre Party. The members of the investigation team at that time were the legendary adventurer, the immortal Alan Cortman, the captain of the Nautilus, Captain Nemo. The Nautilus is a giant submarine that surpasses contemporary technology by decades, and all kinds of black technology are jaw-dropping. The ship is driven entirely by electricity, which is obtained by extracting sodium from seawater, mixing sodium with mercury to form an alloy that replaces the zinc element in the Bunsen battery unit, and then converting it into electricity and storing it in the battery. Dr. Hyde, a schizophrenic scientific madman, developed a transformation potion that can transform into a monster with infinite power. The vampire queen, Mina Harker, does not need much introduction. The invisible man, Scherner, has the same ability as his name, which is invisible. The immortal handsome man, Dorian Gray, has the ability to never die, but is afraid of seeing his own portrait. They call themselves the League of Gentlemen, and only Steve is a standard ordinary person. They gradually discovered a conspiracy of the Spectre Party, which wants to provoke wars between countries, and then sell arms to various countries for profit, and ultimately achieve the goal of controlling the world. But in a later period, Dorian Gray betrayed them and copied their respective abilities by scientific methods. Finally, Cortman took the most dangerous adventure. They found the lair of the Spectre Party, smashed the evil organization, and finally blew up all kinds of high-tech weapons collected by the Spectre Party. It was also in this operation that Cortman sacrificed. In addition to Cortman, Dorian Gray was sealed in the portrait, and the invisible man Scherner died of subsequent complications 1 year after the mission due to extensive burns all over his body. The others also went their separate ways. It was not until today that Steve met everyone in the Gentleman's League again. So it was inevitable that he was a little excited, so much so that he forgot that there was a beautiful woman around him. It was still the old gentleman Cortman who was more careful. He deliberately pulled Diana into their conversation during the conversation. Steve, this beautiful lady is, let me introduce you, this is, Steve only woke up from his excitement at this time and hurried to introduce Diana to everyone. This is why Mina wanted to break up with Steve. He has the common problem of all men in this era. Male chauvinism. Although he likes Diana very much, he still unconsciously regards Diana as his accessory. This is not because of ability, but because of gender. Unfortunately, Diana didn't buy his tricks at all. She was an Amazon princess and a natural feminist. She could understand that Steve ignored her because of the reunion of old friends. But now she didn't need Steve to introduce herself. As a warrior, she was not so timid that she couldn't even say her own name. So Diana interrupted Steve and started to introduce herself. My name is Diana Prince, from Paradise Island, an Amazon warrior. Steve breathed a sigh of relief. At least Diana didn't draw her sword and say that she was the daughter of Queen Hippolyta. It was a great improvement. The others looked at each other because they had never heard of Paradise Island. Paradise Island? Amazon? Oh, I have been to many places and seen many nations in my life, but forgive me for being rude, I have never heard of these two names. Cortman has been adventuring all over the world all his life. It can be said that his footprints are all over the world. It is really rare that he has never heard of a place or nation. Diana was just about to explain, but Steve interrupted her immediately. This is very complicated to explain, and also, how should I put it, unbelievable. Diana is different from ordinary people. Many things that seem natural to her are not so obvious to others. In order to avoid a scene becoming 100,000 whys, Steve decided to explain this to others according to his own understanding. However, even so, after listening to Steve's narration, the others were still confused, and even Mina, who had always been full of resentment, looked over in surprise. After a while, Dr. Jekyll and Hyde asked, is this true? I mean, are the Amazon warriors and the Olympian gods real? Steve made a helpless expression. Amazon? That's true. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. I saw with my own eyes a group of female warriors riding horses with bows and arrows to kill a group of Germans on the beach. As for the Olympian gods, Olympus is real. Diana didn't like Steve questioning the history and beliefs of her race. Paradise Island is the sanctuary given by Zeus to the Amazons. And our enemy is Ares, the god of war. Diana seemed very serious. The others were all well-educated gentlemen. Even if they didn't believe it at all, they wouldn't show it. Cortman even brought out a bunch of questions about Greek mythology to discuss with Diana, which made Diana very comfortable. At least Cortman was much better than Steve, who didn't take it seriously. Although the others didn't believe it either, Diana's erudition also made them very interested. Even Mina couldn't help but talk to Diana. Just when they were talking lively, a nun walked in. The nun's dress was very strange. Although the overall religious clothing was still black, the collar and brim were white. But the details were very different from traditional nuns. First of all, this nun's dress was very close-fitting, even the cuffs were shrunk, and it even felt a bit tight, which highlighted the nun's lines, was very suitable for sports, and looked very neat. Secondly, the nun's hooded cape was very long and large, almost dragging on the ground. At the same time, The cape also wrapped the nun's whole body, revealing only her face, and even her hands were hidden tightly. "Everyone, Reverend Dalton invites you." After the nun came in, she did not greet them, and asked them to follow her directly. The group followed a nun to the back of the chapel, where there was a small altar, and an old priest was doing the aftermath of the ceremony. After seeing Steve and his group, the old priest did not stop his work, but asked the nun to help clean up as soon as possible. "Catherine, help clean up." With the help of Sister Catherine, they quickly put the holy objects used in the ceremony into the storage box. Then Sister Catherine moved the holy objects away alone. "Okay, it seems that everyone has reminisced about the past. Let's get down to business." After that, Reverend Dalton took out a letter of appointment signed by King George V of England from a small secret compartment on the altar and handed it to Courtman. "Before that, you must sign a legally binding letter of authorization, and we need you to keep it strictly confidential." Chapter 155 Legend. "What is this?" Courtman asked in confusion while holding the commission in his hand. "Guarantee," Pastor Dalton smiled and said, "both for you and me. I remember that the last time you accepted the commission from the British Empire, the result was not very good, right? It won't be this time. Last time, those guys were just a bunch of liars. This time, I will give you the most reliable insurance. This is the commission issued by His Majesty the King himself, with His Majesty the King's seal on it. You can rest assured, the last time the commission to investigate the Spectre Party was not actually for Courtman, but a good show directed and performed by the Spectre Party. They just wanted to use this as an excuse to gather the talented people of the Gentlemen's League together and steal their abilities." Courtman smiled. Although the results and process of the last investigation were not very good, Courtman never regretted it. He is the kind of person who will never regret once he makes a choice, and the last investigation at least gave this old man a long-lost passion. Looking at the commission in his hand, the content on it was very strange. The King of England actually hired him as a royal archaeological consultant. Let's not talk about whether the royal family has this position, just when did the royal family have anything to do with archaeology? Others also saw the content of the letter of appointment. After all, their names were on it. They knew even less than Courtman, so they were all confused at the moment. Archaeology? Sorry, I'm a scientist. I can do chemistry and physics, but archaeology? Dr. Hyde felt that the royal family was a bit nonsensical. He was asked to come for archaeology. It's a waste of talent. Mr. Hyde, although it's a bit hurtful to say this, we don't actually need you. We need the monster in your body. Although Pastor Dalton has a kind face, his words are extremely sharp, even poisonous. Because of the incarnation potion, Hyde has a second personality, and that personality is Hyde. In fact, Hyde's real name is Henry Jekyll. Because of the second personality, he no longer uses his original name. If Reverend Dalton Hyde said this before, Hyde would have been very sad. He once wanted to commit suicide because of his second personality. But since the Ghost Party incident, Hyde accepted his second personality, Mr. Hyde, and the two reached a reconciliation and agreement, so he called himself Dr. Hyde. It was also because of this that when faced with Dalton's harsh words, he just rolled his eyes and kept silent. Let's make it clear, gentlemen, so that you don't have any misunderstandings about the mission. Except for Mr. Courtman, the rest of the people came here for a deal. Mr. Hyde will not be mentioned. You have committed more than a dozen murders and dozens of assaults in the UK. If you accept the commission, complete the mission and swear to keep it secret, we will cancel the wanted warrant for you. At least the wanted warrant for Henry Jekyll. You can live safely in England as Hyde. Dalton didn't wait for Hyde to speak, and turned to Captain Nemo and Mina. Captain Nemo, as long as you complete the mission, your Nautilus will be able to secretly resupply at any port in the British Empire. This is what you have always wanted. This is also the reason why Nemo accepted the invitation of the Gentlemen's League. Ms. Mina, you, like Mr. Hyde, have committed many murders. We can reach an agreement with you. As long as you do not violate our direct agreement, you can live in the UK. Mina is a vampire. She needs blood. This has little to do with whether she is kind or not. Vampires will die if they do not suck blood. But Mina is relatively principled. She only preys on those who deserve to die. She never touches innocent people. Of course, this does not affect her from committing murder. More importantly, Britain has the ability to deal with her. The Royal Cathedral Church under the Church of England specializes in this. The reason why they did not trouble Mina before was entirely because of Mina's personal relationship with Van Helsing. Now Van Helsing has long gone to see God, and the contradiction between the two has become increasingly prominent. Now the conditions given by Dalton are undoubtedly very tempting to Mina. She is not alone, she also has her own bloodline, and she must be responsible for them. As for Mr. Steve and Miss Diana, I don't think I need to say much. Although you have done very well on the front line, you have almost committed all the crimes you can commit. Steve accounted for a small part of the reason. Americans are not good birds. When he was on the front line, Steve did a lot of things in private. The upper echelons of the Allied powers knew this, but in order to win over the United States, most of them turned a blind eye. Steve was a spy, and it was normal for him to seek benefits for his country. And Diana was even more excessive. Her unique values and strong strength were enough to give everyone a headache. Steve was obviously very clear about this, so he had no opinion on the task proposed by Dalton. It would be great if he could clean up the mess. Unfortunately, Diana disagreed. No, I'm a warrior. My mission is to defeat the god of war Ares. I'm not interested in what orders your king gives. The implication was that he didn't want to accept this task. Dalton was not surprised by Diana's reaction. 3 months was enough time for him to collect enough information. Dalton just looked at Steve. Mr. Steve, I hope you can understand that the reason why we are willing to trade with you is entirely because of Miss Diana. If Miss Diana refuses to accept the mission, then, the meaning is very clear. How could Steve not understand? Others did not think highly of Steve at all, and the reason why they brought him along was entirely because he could convince Diana. Understood, Steve naturally knew what to do. Very good, Dalton then said to Diana, don't refuse so quickly, this matter has a lot to do with you, with me. Diana didn't understand. Yes, it is because of your appearance that the royal family and we have made up our minds to carry out this mission. If successful, it will have a profound impact on the war situation, including the god of war Ares you mentioned. After speaking, Dalton turned his head and said to everyone, I think you know that the current situation of the war is not good. Especially because of Ludendorff's activeness, the situation has reached an extremely critical moment. We have intelligence showing that Ludendorff is having deep contact with some monsters that we are not willing to talk about. We have reason to believe that the situation of the war will become more complicated and unpredictable. It is in view of this situation that the royal family and the cabinet decided to start this top-secret mission. Diana was no longer so resistant because of Dalton's words and Steve's persuasion. She was actually quite curious about what Dalton wanted to do by gathering them together. What exactly is the top-secret mission you are talking about? Dalton did not speak, but just pointed to the letter of authorization. Obviously, you can only participate if you sign. Now everyone had nothing to say, and signed their names one by one. Dalton put away the letter of authorization with satisfaction, and then spoke. Didn't I say before that the appearance of Miss Diana made us really determined to start this plan? Me. Yes. We know your ability and origin, so we thought, since Amazon really exists, do other people in myths and legends also exist? At this time, Cortman raised his head and asked, so you want us to open the tomb of the legendary immortal, the Lion King, the Dragon Hunter, the Golden Lion of Britain, and the strongest knight in history K. Britannia? Yes, Dalton did not hide it anymore. Mr. Cortman, do you know the legend about this Lion King? The golden immortal lion will wake up from his slumber when darkness sweeps the world, Cortman said slowly. But everyone else was a little puzzled by this. They had only heard that the eternal King Arthur would return. Because this legend is very unpopular, only a few legends will mention it, because most of the legends about Kai are mixed in the legend of King Arthur. King Arthur is the protagonist, and Kai has always been a supporting role. In the process of spreading, some things about the supporting characters will naturally be ignored, and even many deeds will be added to the protagonist to highlight the protagonist. Only the legends before the 15th century will focus on describing Kay's deeds. Later, because many Christian elements were added to the legend of King Arthur, Kay's presence was weakened a lot, and he could only become an important supporting character in the early stage of the legend, and he left after Arthur completed the unification. It's just a legend. Although Cortman knew this legend, it didn't mean he would believe it. If the royal family hadn't found him so carefully and told him about it, he would even think that someone was playing a prank. But since the royal family spent so much money to find him, it means that the royal family must have some dry goods in their hands. He now hopes that Dalton can take out the dry goods. What if there is evidence that this is not a legend? After saying this, Cortman clapped his hands, and Sister Catherine, who had left before, came out holding a box. Dalton opened the box, took out a slate, and placed it in front of everyone. This is a slab excavated near Leicester about 89 years ago. According to so many years of research, many experts have always believed that this slab is about 7000 BC. The text on it is a kind of text that has never been discovered. Fortunately, this text has a great origin with Celtic language, and the two have many similarities. So after years of deciphering, we finally got some information 30 years ago. After speaking, Dalton handed Cortman a piece of paper. It was written on it, the legend of K that Cortman just said, word for word. This is very powerful. A legend that has been passed down to the present day is recorded on a slab from 7000 BC. The significance of this is beyond imagination. At least they can be sure of one thing, that is, the age of King Arthur and Kay is far beyond a previous historian's estimate of about 500 AD. It can also prove that King Arthur and King Kay of the Lion really existed. What is the line of words below? Coordinates. The coordinates of the mausoleum. Have you found the mausoleum? Cortman stood up and said excitedly. This is evidence of the existence of the mythical figure. This discovery can bring out so many things. Not bad. Dalton curled his lips and said, I did find it, but the only problem is how to get in. After that, Dalton threw out a stack of photos. On it was the entrance to an underground mausoleum, and some basic conditions, but there were no more detailed photos. Dalton then gave an explanation. In the 10 years after the stone tablet was deciphered, we organized nearly 20 explorations of the mausoleum, and each time we suffered heavy losses. Most of them were wiped out. Even if there were survivors, they were completely crazy. So we terminated this operation as early as 20 years ago. It was not until 7 years ago that we noticed that we were interested in reorganizing the expedition team. Now with the appearance of Miss Diana, we finally made up our minds to restart the operation. Cortman didn't care about Dalton's explanation. He just studied the photos wholeheartedly. The photos of the deer were all black and white, and the clarity was worrying, so many details needed to be carefully studied. Okay, I'll have Sister Catherine send you all the information later. You have to hurry now. Reverend Dalton didn't give them time to study the information carefully. Instead, he kept urging them to act as soon as possible. Sergeant, Dr. Hyde asked in surprise. Dalton's face didn't look good when he said this. The Germans already know something. Just a few days ago, a group of Germans suddenly raided the ruins and entered them. Now everyone understood. No wonder Dalton told them everything so happily. Otherwise, according to the bureaucratic style of those bigwigs, it would be impossible to be so vigorous and offer them such good trading conditions. Soon, the group got on the train to Leicester under the leadership of Sister Catherine. Sister Catherine was a person Dalton specifically placed in the team to monitor them. Neither Steve nor Cortman cared too much about this. This matter is so important that it is normal for the authorities to insert people. In fact, if the authorities did not insert people this time, they would feel guilty. After all, the experience of being deceived last time was still vivid in their minds. But they did not know this Sister Catherine. The nun only spoke to them when they first met, and never communicated with any of them afterwards. Steve did talk to her out of professional habit, but the nun just held a rosary and prayed silently, and never responded. As companions who are going to adventure together, it is necessary to know each other, but the nun obviously has no interest in communicating with them, which makes Steve, who is temporarily serving as the leader, very distressed. Cortman, do you know this nun? In the end, Steve had no choice but to seek Cortman's help. If we talk about having a wide range of friends, Cortman is the one. The old man's life experience is so rich that it can definitely be written into a series of best-selling novels, more than a dozen. When the Gentlemen's League was organized a few years ago, most of them were Cortman's relationships. I don't know her, but judging from her clothes, she should be from the Holy Church. I don't know much about this organization. They usually only deal with supernatural events within the British Empire, so Mina should know more. But you only need to know one thing. The famous demon hunter Van Helsing comes from this organization. Van Helsing is the most famous demon hunter in modern times. He has traveled all over Europe and has been active for almost 4 centuries. He has hunted countless monsters and demons. Even the Roman Catholic Church has a deep connection with Van Helsing. This name is definitely famous among some well-informed people in Europe. Steve naturally knows this person. Although he has never seen him, Van Helsing died decades ago. Speaking of which, this is also a strange story. Van Helsing lived for 4 centuries, hunting dark creatures everywhere. Many people even suspected that he was really a warrior sent by God to the world and was immortal. As a result, more than 100 years ago, after Van Helsing killed the vampire king Count Dracula, he began to age rapidly and finally died of old age decades ago. Back to the point, Cortman's meaning is very clear. This Sister Catherine is definitely not simple. After getting this answer, Steve can only give up. He wants to get detailed information about everyone, completely out of professional habit. They are used to understanding the situation, and then select useful intelligence from them. Just like when Steve found out that Diana was very yearning for the outside world on Paradise Island, he took advantage of this and asked Diana to bring him out. This is completely out of the professional habit of an agent, and it is hard to say whether it is right or wrong. When Steve sat back next to Diana without getting anything, he didn't expect to have an unexpected gain. "There is an ominous smell on that woman," Diana suddenly said without a beginning or an end after Steve sat back. "What?" Steve asked. "I don't know, but let's be careful." After that, Diana ignored Steve. Diana was a little uncomfortable with Steve's performance that day. She felt that Steve ignored her too much. No matter what, Diana is a woman after all. Steve. Around the morning of the next day, a group of people followed Sister Catherine to an underground ruin. The entrance to the entire ruins is 200 meters underground, and on the ground is a noble manor. Although the owner of the manor is nominally a wealthy businessman, the actual owner is the British royal family. They were also received by royal family members, perhaps as a role of confidential talks. The royal family of this era is much more powerful than that of later generations. But this is all off topic. The royal family will never give a group of outsiders a chance to spy on the royal family's secrets. So there was no greeting, and they were taken directly to the entrance of the ruins. The ruins were built in a huge underground cave. The entrance was a huge stone gate-shaped building. The stone gate had been blown down, and the broken boulders were all around the entrance. Seeing these precious cultural relics being blown to pieces, Cortman, the Zyb archaeologist, was distressed and sobbed. These are precious cultural relics. But at the moment, Cortman didn't have the mind to explore these, because there were more important things waiting for them to discover. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 156 Hot Nun. The group quickly entered the mausoleum. Originally, the royal family would send a team of soldiers to follow. These soldiers were sent here after the Germans raided the manor. But Cotman rejected them. According to Cotman, these soldiers should serve the country on the battlefield or go home to accompany their wives and children, instead of wasting them in such an illusory action, where there may be great discoveries or nothing. In short, it is unnecessary to take a group of good guys for such a thing. This made the soldiers very unhappy. They are warriors. How can warriors retreat? But this complaint disappeared after Cotman asked Mina to beat them up. Mina didn't even transform, and beat them without any ability to fight back in human appearance. A group of men were beaten half to death by a delicate little widow, so they could only leave in disgrace. In this way, a group of people entered the black hole entrance under the attention of a group of bruised soldiers. The interior of the mausoleum was not as gloomy and scary as everyone thought at first. In fact, after the initial section of the road, the space inside was not only open, but also had many glowing crystals for lighting, without the sense of oppression of the underground space. However, even so, the group walked very slowly. First, according to previous records, the mausoleum was not safe, but extremely dangerous. For safety reasons, they had to be careful. Secondly, both Cotman and Captain Nemo were very interested in the murals and reliefs inside the passage. Needless to say, Cotman liked exciting adventures when he was young, and he was more interested in cultural connotations when he was old. Captain Nemo was the same. Moreover, Cotman might not be as knowledgeable as Captain Nemo, which was why Captain Nemo joined in. This bearded captain was not only familiar with the ocean, but in fact, Captain Nemo had his own unique insights into science, art, history, and philosophy. When the two polymaths met, they certainly wanted to study the murals carefully. Even Diana was very interested in these murals and reliefs. Amazon inherited the Olympus culture and preserved many ancient documents. She herself was also very interested in these ancient civilizations. These murals on the walls of the passage did not have the rough style of the ancient ancestors at all. On the contrary, they were quite delicate and realistic. There were many things depicted on them, including the living customs of humans in that era, and even a detailed description of an ancient city. Finally, Cortman determined that it was the legendary great city, Camelot. It turns out that Camelot really exists. Cortman put down the magnifying glass in his hand and said with emotion, "Cortman is British. As long as he's British, he will have a special feeling for the legend of King Arthur." Although Steve has also heard the legend of King Arthur since he was a child, he does not have so many feelings. He is a young man. He is more concerned about reality. Is it really dangerous? Why did we walk for 10 minutes and nothing happened? 10 minutes. Why do I remember that we walked for almost half an hour? Dr. Hyde is a science student and is not very interested in the things of liberal arts students, so he has been playing soy sauce. Hearing Steve's words, he said a little puzzled. "It's 45 minutes, Captain Nemo suddenly said seriously. Captain Nemo was a man with a very good sense of time. He was very sure that he was not wrong. It should be 45 minutes. Diana was a little confused. She didn't feel anything at all. She just felt that she had just walked for a few minutes. Cortman saw Nemo's serious expression and realized that something must have gone wrong. Captain Nemo was not a person who spoke without thinking. He carefully recalled the time he entered here. "I feel it is an hour." Now everyone understood that something was wrong. It didn't make sense that everyone's feelings were so different. Cortman immediately looked at the others. He wanted to know if there was anything wrong with everyone, but after looking around, he found that everyone was normal. But he had a sense of disobedience, as if something was wrong, but he couldn't tell. So Cortman inspected everyone again. This feeling still existed, so Cortman calmed down and looked at everyone again. It was 5 people. That's right. Wait? 5 people? How many people are we? How many of us came here together? Cortman asked suddenly. This is a bit nonsensical. They came in together. How many of them didn't know what was going on? Cortman, don't scare me. We are clearly, Hyde spoke first. Without changing his form, he was just an ordinary person. Wait, how many of us are there? Cortman, me, Captain Nemo, Steve, Diana, and Mina. Where is Mina? Hyde finally realized that he hadn't seen Mina since he entered the passage. At this time, Diana said with a gloomy face, "No, there are 7 of us in total. And that Catherine." Now everyone looked over. They obviously forgot that there was a person named Catherine. They must have had an accident. Cortman took out his Winchester M1894 rifle from his back. This is a double-barreled rifle. Cortman likes this kind of gun the most. The others also immediately prepared for battle. Diana took out her shield aegis and the sword of Vulcan. Only Hyde was at a loss. Because he found that his big man didn't listen to his call at all, and he couldn't transform. Hyde was just about to tell them about his experience. A shrill scream made the whole world collapse. Yes, it collapsed. Everything they saw shattered and disappeared like glass. Then everyone felt dizzy. When they opened their eyes again, they found that the scene in front of them had changed a lot. They were still in the passage, but they were lying on the ground, and Mina and Catherine were fighting a group of dark knights. These knights seemed to be made up of shadows or darkness, with only an outline, but with entities. Every time Mina and Catherine killed a dark knight, they disintegrated and disappeared, but the problem was that these things kept running out of the passage, which was endless. Mina had transformed into a vampire, with disheveled hair, and her black hair was flying freely in the air like a group of snakes. The lady's dress on her body was also transformed into a queen's evening dress by magic. There were bats made of shadows flying around. Mina was flying in the air, screaming and attacking the knights, and the bats she released also attacked the dark knights everywhere. It was Mina's scream that woke everyone up just now. But what is more eye-catching is Sister Catherine. This nun holds 2 obviously modified huge revolvers, and 2 huge revolvers are also pinned on her high heels. When she fights, she looks gorgeous and beautiful like dancing, but her power is real. What's more interesting is that during the battle, her nun's uniform is nowhere to be found, and she is only wearing a sexy tight-fitting leather jumpsuit. The huge tassels on her arms are also very eye-catching, especially her wide-open back, which almost exposes the cleavage. With her hot body and flexible and bold posture in the fight, all the men who see it can only suppress the gun tactically. But compared with her hot body, What is more surprising is her fighting power. Every move she makes will be accompanied by a powerful bullet. The dark knights who besiege her can't get close to her at all. Of course, what is more curious is how her 4 revolvers can achieve the level of uninterrupted shooting. Anyway, no one has seen her change bullets. It is common sense that a revolver has only 6 bullets. Wicked weave. Just as the crowd was still in shock, Catherine suddenly posed in an extremely seductive pose. Her clothes suddenly turned into hair, which turned her clothes from a tights into a sexy bikini. At the same time, a huge magic circle appeared behind her. A huge blue arm wrapped in hair stretched out from the magic circle and slammed into the surrounding dark knights. The huge force directly disintegrated and disappeared several dark knights. I used to write 2 chapters a day, a total of 4,000 words. No one said anything, just asked me to update more. I thought I would try hard, so I wrote 5,200 words yesterday and posted 1 chapter. As a result, many book friends asked why there was only 1 update. Then I will split 5,500 words into 2 chapters today. By the way, let me say what I think. Some book friends also said that I wrote less, and I also have my own situation. I am not a full-time writer. With my level of failure, I would probably starve to death if I were a full-time writer. I have a job and have never thought about being a full-time writer. Writing books is just a hobby. My last book was a complete failure and made no money at all. I often took leave and rarely had full attendance every month. The little money I earned from writing was not enough to buy cigarettes. But I still persisted until the book was banned, just because it was a hobby and I was happy to see someone reading my book. It's not that I don't want to write more, but my ability and time are limited. If I can code a few thousand words an hour, that's all, but I really can't do it. I get off work at 5 o'clock every day. If I work overtime, I get off work at least at 7 o'clock. In addition, our company is also busy with business, and overtime is the norm. After get off work, I go home to eat and take a shower. The fastest time to start coding is 8 o'clock. It's basically 11 o'clock to finish 4,000 words. It's faster if I have saved drafts, but I don't have any saved drafts so far. So recently I finished coding around 11 o'clock, check it again, and send it out at 11:30, and then go to bed. I saw someone rewarded me, and I also wanted to add more, but I really can't do it. I just try to write as much as I can. So for those guys who rewarded me, I can only say sorry. The boy apologized sincerely. Chapter 157 which. All the men who saw this scene were stunned, especially Steve and Hyde, who were the worst. They even had nosebleeds. Bitch, 2 Diana and Mina cursed at the same time while dealing with their respective enemies. It was unclear whether they were cursing the 2 men or the indecent sister Catherine. On the contrary, Courtman and Captain Nemo were more pure-hearted. Although they were also very interested in Catherine's beautiful body, they did not forget their own duties. Courtman's rifle was used to perfection, and every shot could accurately hit the key parts of those black knights. Captain Nemo was in front to cover Courtman. Although Captain Nemo was most famous for his Nautilus, in fact, Captain Nemo's swordsmanship was also at the pinnacle. His swordsmanship was a bit like Indian dance. Although it looked funny, it was actually airtight and water could not get in. Whenever those knights approached, they would be chopped into pieces by Captain Nemo's command knife in the blink of an eye. This middle-aged and elderly team cooperated very well. Only Hyde and Steve were burdens. So in addition to dealing with the Dark Knights, Diana had to split her attention to protect the 2 of them. Hey, Steve? What are you doing? Fight back. Diana was angry at Steve's poor performance. In the past, when they were on the front line, she always felt that Steve was only barely a fighter, but he was better than ordinary men, but now he has completely become a bad teammate. Courtman was also anxious. Among their group, Hyde was the main DPS, and his damage output was the strongest. But since they woke up, Hyde seemed to have disappeared and has not transformed until now. Hyde. What are you doing? Are you waiting for us to prepare a birthday cake for you? When Diana and Courtman looked at the 2 burdens at the same time, they were almost angry to death. Hyde and Steve were like possessed by evil spirits. Their faces were flushed, they were breathing heavily, and suspicious liquids flowed out of their mouths, and they looked like they were horny. Seeing this scene, Courtman was just stunned, but Diana's reaction was much more intense. Just like Steve had a crush on Diana, Diana also had a special feeling for the man who brought her out of Paradise Island. Seeing that the man she had a crush on actually showed such a cheap expression to another woman, Diana exploded directly. She untied the lasso of truth from her waist and threw it over. The lasso of truth was like an automatic navigation, firmly binding Steve. Diana pulled the lasso of truth and threw Steve out like a meteor hammer. Bang, bang, bang. After using Steve to knock 3 dark knights away, Diana took the lasso back. At this time, Steve had recovered from the strange emotions just now, but of course he couldn't escape with a bruised face. "What are you doing?" Steve shouted in shock and anger. "You know it yourself." Diana didn't want to explain, so she pulled out a long sword stuck in the ground and continued to deal with the dark knights who kept running out of the passage. Hyde on the other side was so lucky. At least Cortman couldn't wake him up all at once. As a result, Hyde became more and more possessed, and even walked towards Catherine on the other side involuntarily, completely ignoring the Dark Knight beside him. "Be careful. Hyde. Damn it, what are you doing?" Cortman was almost anxious to death when he saw his old friend's stupid look. Maybe it was Cortman's shouting that made Catherine notice the situation here, or it was simply Hyde's disgusting expression that touched Catherine's psychological bottom line, making her feel cold. Anyway, she noticed Hyde's situation. Catherine frowned and looked at Hyde with disgust, then swung her hand at Hyde, and a tuft of hair hit Hyde's face like a whip, and Hyde was knocked away with a bang. When waiting for Hyde to hit the wall of the passage and fall down, he finally woke up. Who hit me?" Seeing his old friend regain consciousness, Cortman immediately shouted, "Damn it! Hyde, come over and help us, we need a big guy." Only then did Hyde notice what was happening at the scene. He didn't care about that and took out a metal bottle from his arms and drank a sip. Then Hyde's body changed. He began to expand rapidly and finally turned into a super strong man over 3 meters tall. "Ha, Mr. Hyde is here." After the transformation, Hyde's voice and demeanor changed greatly, and his eyes were full of tyranny and evil. "Hyde, smash." With the addition of the super DPS, the pressure on the 7 people dropped sharply. Hyde is worthy of being a DPS. As soon as he appeared, he attracted all the hatred. Those dark knights immediately pounced on him like flies seeing poop. At this time, the others had the mind to do other things. Mina. Go see where these things came from, and if possible, plug their rat holes. Cortman was experienced, and immediately chose Mina, the only one who was suitable to be a scout among all the people present, to find out the situation. No need, Catherine called her before Mina made any move. Without waiting for others to ask questions, Catherine disappeared in the passage with a few flashes. After a while, all the Black Knights suddenly stopped, and then disintegrated and disappeared, leaving no trace. After a while, Catherine walked out of the passage with a purple crystal in her hand. "This is the energy to maintain the trap. Just take it down," Catherine explained very concisely. "How did you know?" Cortman asked curiously. "I just know." Catherine was obviously unwilling to explain too much. The crisis was resolved, and Mina no longer had to float in the air. She fell to the ground, looked at Catherine with suspicion, and then pointed at Mr. Hyde and Steve, who had returned the control of their bodies to Dr. Hyde. So what happened between the two of them just now? Catherine thought about it and felt that this situation would inevitably happen as long as there was a fight next, so it would be better to tell her in advance. "That's my special ability. When men see more than 10% of my skin, 100% of them will become obsessed with me and try to mate with me, regardless of their original sexual orientation. 70% of men will lose this urge after I cover most of my skin. But in the other 30%, this urge becomes a dangerous obsessive-compulsive symptom and cannot be cured. They are lucky. If they were in the 30%, I would execute them directly." Catherine's explanation stunned everyone. It was the first time they heard of such an ability. At the same time, they also understood why Catherine dressed so conservatively before, only showing her face. "Are you a witch?" Mina said in surprise. Catherine's ability is really similar to that of a witch. Witches were very famous in the Middle Ages in Europe. Their abilities were either extremely strange or extremely powerful. So in the Middle Ages, witches were feared by the world, until the Vatican launched the infamous witch hunt, also known as the witch trial operation. This wave of persecution of witches lasted from 1480 to 1780 and swept across Europe for 300 years. Once a decent woman was falsely accused of being a witch, she was immediately beheaded and her body was burned. The number of innocent people killed by the knife was too many to count. This is a dark chapter in the history of Europe and human civilization. According to legend, millions of women were victimized in these 300 years. I also read this in a document, which is probably nonsense. Baidu said it was 100,000, it was also from then on that witches disappeared from the world. Anyway, as of now, witches are much rarer than vampires. At least Mina has never seen a living witch in more than 200 years. The Anglican Church actually allowed witches to enter the church, although Catherine did not answer Mina. Mina was sure that Catherine was a witch. Although the Anglican Church has been separated from the Roman Catholic Church for many years, it still belongs to Christianity. How could it possibly accept witches? This made Catherine react. You, a vampire, are swaggering in the church, why can't I join the church? Here I have to make it clear that the vampires in this world have no reaction to the cross and the statue of Jesus, let alone the Bible. Mina still reads the Bible every day. It is true that vampires are afraid of sunlight, silver and garlic. According to the history of vampires, they existed for a long time before the emergence of Christianity. Of course, it is also true that the church and vampires are hostile. Mina was choked. The hostility between vampires and the church has a history of thousands of years. It has only eased recently, but only a small number of moderate vampires can barely live in peace with the Anglican Church. In Europe, vampires and the church are still fighting to the death. Okay, we can leave these things for later. Now I think we need to move on. I have a hunch that there will be a lot of trouble waiting for us later. Cortman stopped the two women from arguing. The two also knew that the most important thing now was to complete the mission, so they didn't say anything. The group continued to move forward with a lot of thoughts in their minds. It must be said that Cortman's premonition was indeed very accurate. The deeper they went into the mausoleum, the more troubles they encountered. The illusion traps before were just child's play. In the mausoleum, there were countless traps. There were also many monsters hidden that they had never seen before. If they were not all skilled, they might have been wiped out halfway. But even so, some people were injured. Captain Nemo was hit in the abdomen by a gargoyle and almost had a kidney taken away. Steve was shot in the thigh by a group of stone statues holding bows and arrows, and Mr. Hyde had one arm cut off by a trap and was blinded by a monster. Cortman, on the other hand, had no problems, and he deserved his title of the Undead. The three women were impressive. They were almost the main force at the back. If they hadn't been blocking left and right, the team might have been reduced in number long ago. But no matter what, they finally came to the main part of the mausoleum. A huge underground palace. When a group of people walked into the palace, their first reaction was to close their eyes to avoid being blinded by the golden light inside. Everywhere they could see was gold and jewelry. They dared to swear that none of them had ever seen such a scene. Countless treasures filled the entire underground palace, and everywhere they could see was golden. Cortman even suspected that all the wealth of mankind was concentrated here. The protagonist will appear tomorrow. Don't worry, it's not a delay. This is how the outline was written before. There was originally a plot of Tomb Adventure, about 4 chapters, at most 5 chapters, but no one liked it and insisted on seeing the protagonist, so it could only be reduced to 2 chapters. It's a pity that I had specially prepared a lot of information about tomb exploration before, but I can only waste it. Chapter 158 Awakening. This is too exaggerated. Steve limped and hopped to help Diana walk to a mountain of treasure. Was ancient England so rich? Steve came from the United States. Of course, the United States at that time was not as powerful as it is in later generations, and the people were not so proud. Even the Americans at that time thought they were vulgar. The Americans of that era were superstitious about aristocratic status, which was also due to this inferiority complex. But there is one thing that Americans are still very confident about, that is, rich resources. Americans like to compare this with other countries. However, when they say this, they will subconsciously ignore the huge colonial system of Britain. Cortman can't understand Steve's simple patriotism, because in the concept of this old British gentleman, the United States is just a disobedient colony, barely a poor cousin, and he doesn't know much about their special inferiority complex. What he cares more about is the craftsmanship of these treasures. Cortman picked up a gold candlestick and found that the purity of these gold products was quite high, which shows that the metallurgical level of people in that era was quite high. Looking at the shape of the candlestick, the forging process was also extremely high, and the artistry was also very high. This shows that King Arthur's era was much more advanced than they imagined, at least much stronger than the Middle Ages they experienced, and even comparable to the Renaissance. For example, their armor style is very close to the plate armor of the Renaissance. It's incredible. These discoveries are so amazing that they will bring about earth-shaking changes in the history of human civilization. A group of people listened to Cortman's vernacular, while on the other side, a group of people rushed to the core of the mausoleum before them. Remember the Germans mentioned before? This group of Germans did not die in the passage of the mausoleum as the British thought. On the contrary, they finally walked into the storage place of Kay's coffin after paying a huge price. Kane, a woman in a tight-fitting combat uniform, screamed hysterically. If you look closely, you will find a German army badge on her shoulder. The woman was very beautiful, tall, thin, elegant and lazy. She had a bright complexion, big black eyes, brown hair, a sweet voice and liked to talk. Unfortunately, at this moment, her expression was very ugly. On the other side of her, a muscular man was cut into two pieces by a sudden light. The man did not seem to feel that he was cut in half. He only looked at his abdomen after the woman screamed. Then he looked up at the woman blankly and fell to the ground. When his body fell to the ground, his body had been burned to some debris. When he fell to the ground, he turned into ashes and dissipated. This situation usually only occurs in one kind of creature, that is, vampires. It turns out that these so-called Germans are actually vampires in disguise. The remaining three vampires saw their companions sacrificed, opened their big mouths with canine teeth, and let out sharp and piercing screams. Then the three vampires turned into three groups of black smoke and began to wreak havoc in the tomb. Countless traps were activated, and the three vampires were on guard, but these traps basically did not work. The speed of these guys' reaction was almost beyond the limit of what mortals could perceive. About 15 minutes later, the three vampires turned pale and showed their true form again. At this time, their aura had weakened to a certain extent. Obviously, the full exertion just now consumed them a lot. Camilla, you'd better pray that your previous intelligence is correct, otherwise my Vansho clan will never let you go. For your ghost plan, our Vansho clan has sacrificed more than 30 members. Among the three vampires, a middle-aged man with obvious aristocratic temperament said to the female vampire Camilla with a gloomy face. Rusfin, don't push the responsibility onto me. I also lost more than a dozen good fighters. This is a decision we made together. As for whether Fansho will let me go, don't bother with it. You have to understand that even if Fansho wants to cause trouble, they will find you first. Well, now that it's time, let's not fight among ourselves. This result is not too bad for us now. At least the wealth is real. No matter what, as long as we have those things, we can give an explanation to the old men in the Council of Elders. Another vampire male interrupted the argument between the two. This vampire looked very ordinary and had a calm temperament. If he said he was a worker, no one would doubt it. This man was obviously very prestigious. The other two stopped talking after he spoke. He was right. The wealth they found in the underground palace of the mausoleum was enough to tempt the vampire elders of the Council of Elders. Most vampires with a long history were very rich, but the wealth outside was definitely not rich. Vampires need wealth, even more than humans. Now, let's take a look at the final grand prize. If we win, then the three of us can completely replace the elders and become the true rulers of the blood race. The ordinary-looking vampire finally couldn't help but walk towards Kai's coffin. 30 members of their group entered the mausoleum, but now they are the only ones alive. In addition, they sacrificed dozens of members in the early preparations. The price was too high. Now it's finally the time to reap the rewards. How can he not be excited? Ferris. Wait, Camilla screamed immediately when she saw that the ordinary-looking vampire was going to open Kai's coffin directly. She was already scared by the endless traps and mechanisms in this underground palace. Unfortunately, Ferris didn't listen to her, but directly used the command knife in his hand to cut open the lid of the coffin. Of course, he was not so reckless. As soon as the command knife was chopped out, he disappeared on the spot. Seeing Ferris's action, Camilla and Rusfin also disappeared on the spot at the same time. However, they didn't find anything. They were completely scaring themselves. After waiting for a long time, the three people reappeared in the same place. It seems that we are finally going to get our reward, the noble Rusfin smiled. After saying that, he could no longer hold back his excitement and rushed to the broken coffin. Wait! What is this? How is this possible? Boom! Before the other two could react, a golden, bony arm stretched out from the coffin and punched Ruthven, who was lying on the coffin. Time jumped to before the three vampires opened the coffin, and the time period was a bit vague. Because Kai himself had no concept of time, and even he himself did not know what was going on. Kai could feel his own existence, but other things were a blur. He seemed to be able to think, but his thoughts were extremely vague and completely out of control. He felt like he was in a dream. But he didn't know what he was dreaming about, and he had no memory of what he was thinking the moment before. The whole person was in a daze and his consciousness was unclear. He felt like he had slept for a long time, but also like he had just fallen asleep. He wanted to wake up, but he couldn't resist the sleepiness. This feeling was like the way those office workers get up every morning, always reminding themselves that they are late, but they can't wake up. I don't know when, Kai finally felt that the sleepiness was slowly fading away, and his consciousness gradually returned. Although he was still in a daze, he at least knew that he was going to wake up, and this feeling became clearer and clearer. At the same time, Kai began to have a slight sense of the outside world. Finally, just when Kai's consciousness became clearer and clearer, a loud noise drove away the last and most stubborn sleepiness. Kai opened his eyes. But what came into view was not Arthur, Uther and Morgana, but a person he had never seen before. More importantly, there was no trace of living people on this guy. It was an enemy. Kai didn't care that he had just woken up, whether it was his body or consciousness, he was still weak, and he punched the dead man in the face. Chapter 159 8,000 Years of Dreams. Kai's friends have never had a dead person. He does know a dead person named Osiris, but that person is green, and they are not friends. He and his son get along well. So when the dead face appeared in front of him, Kai punched him directly. In this case, generally speaking, it is never wrong to hit first and talk later. But after the punch, Kai found something wrong. It was not that he hit wrongly, but Kai felt sore all over his body, just like a person who had slept for 3 days and 3 nights at home, and his blood circulation was not flowing. Of course, Kai's level was much more serious. Kai guessed that he must have slept for more than 3 days. But Kai still endured the discomfort and forced himself to climb out of a coffin. Why is it a coffin? Kai climbed out of the coffin and saw 2 dead people, the same dead people as the guy who put his face in front of him just now. Who, you, are? Kai's voice scared himself. This was really his voice. Kai also felt that his throat was dry and about to split. It felt like swallowing a bunch of thumbtacks and sawing it with a saw. Kai was startled, but the other 2 vampires were more than just startled. Because they couldn't understand what was in front of them. It was a tall mummy. In addition, the surface of the mummy was not dark and shriveled skin, but a layer of golden things, a bit like metal, a bit like leather. They even saw that the mummy was wearing a skirt armor. In short, the mummy was very shiny. But the really scary thing was its head. They couldn't tell what kind of monster's head it was. It was golden, dry, and scabby. What the hell is this? Camilla shouted in surprise. Obviously she was asking Ferris, but unfortunately Ferris didn't know either. But Ferris knew one thing, that is, the thing in front of them was definitely not something they could deal with. At the moment when this monster stood out of the coffin, Ferris felt an unprecedented crisis. It was a feeling of seeing a natural enemy. After shouting this sentence, Ferris turned into a ball of gas and disappeared. Camilla reacted a little slowly, but she followed immediately. Unfortunately, their speed was still too slow. Seeing that the 2 guys who were obviously not alive wanted to escape from him, Kai immediately used magic without caring about his weakness. Thunder Pillar, a golden thunder exploded directly in the path of the 2 guys. Although they disappeared, in Kai's perception, they had nowhere to hide. It can only be said that their stealth skills were too poor. They did not hide their breath at all. This crappy stealth technique was not as effective as the stealth of the Assassin King that Kai had killed before. The thunder pillar directly collapsed the entrance of the tomb, and at the same time, the thunder exploded and blasted the 2 vampires out of the void. The power of the thunder pillar made the 2 guys numb all over their bodies, and they had no ability to move at all for a while. Kai felt that his magic level seemed to have declined a lot. He couldn't even kill 2 small fish. But now is not the time to sigh about this. Kai has more important things to do. He just took a look at his body and was almost scared to death. He was really skin and bones. It's not an adjective, but a real skin wrapped around bones. Kai even felt that his waist had disappeared, and it was so thin that only his spine was left. Moreover, his stomach was so fucking hungry. Kai himself was surprised that he was still alive. In order to prevent himself from starving to death as soon as he woke up, Kai decided to deal with his own situation first. Kai stretched his hand to the side, and a golden ripple light circle appeared. Kai took out a cup from the light circle. It was the holy grail of life that Kai took from Noe. Without casting a spell, the cup gathered a cup of water in the light. The moment this cup was taken from Kai, it completely became his property, and he could use it however he wanted. He drank the holy water and the holy grail in one gulp, and an unprecedented comfort washed over Kai's whole body. His originally shriveled body began to recover rapidly. In just 1 or 2 seconds, Kai was in full condition. In the eyes of the 3 vampires, Kai's performance was very evil. A mummy turned into a giant in armor within a few seconds. At this time, the 3 vampires had recovered from the blow just now. Then, is that the Holy Grail? Camilla swallowed her saliva and said in a hoarse voice. No matter what, vampires live in human society, so they are inevitably influenced by humans. For example, the Holy Grail. This legend originally did not refer to a cup at the beginning, but during the spread, it absorbed a lot of myths from other places. Now the impression that the Holy Grail is a cup has been deeply rooted in people's minds, and this legend is also very deeply rooted in the hearts of vampires. In the legend, the Holy Grail can heal all pains, even change the climate, and can also bring people back to life and make them immortal. The cup in Kai's hand is very consistent with the legend. That's not something we can think about. What we have to consider now is to survive. Ferris was very calm. From the current situation, they really met the legendary Golden Lion of Britain, the immortal, the strongest knight in the world. Can you tell from the appearance? That head is a lion. Although he didn't know how strong this legendary existence was, Ferris was sure that it was definitely much stronger than them. Kai, who recovered, finally shifted his attention to the 3 dead people. Who are you? Why are you here? How is King Uther? And where are Arthur and Morgana? Where are they? What Kai wanted to know most now was how his relatives were doing. Although he had killed Sejin and solved the biggest crisis before he fell asleep, he didn't know how long he had been asleep, so he was a little worried about them. It was also because of his excessive worry that Kai ignored many clues that were put on the surface, such as the clothes of these people, which had a very typical modern style. At least in the Camelot era, there were no tight combat uniforms. The 3 vampires opened their mouths and found that they didn't know where to start, because they didn't understand what Kai was saying at all. Ancient Celtic and modern English are very different. They are completely 2 different languages. The 3 vampires can't even understand Celtic, let alone ancient Celtic. Kai, who didn't get an answer, obviously didn't have that much patience. The 3 vampires only felt a flash before their eyes, and Kai's huge body disappeared from their sight, and then Rusfin, holding his nose, suffered. This guy is too showy. Kai thought he was the leader of the 3 dead men just by first impression. In Kai's eyes, the boss usually dresses more brightly. Rusfin comes from the Vanjo clan among the 13 vampire clans. This clan has always been the leader of the vampire secret party. From this perspective, Kai really did not find the wrong person. Rusfin is a vampire over 300 years old. Even among vampires, he's a middle-aged vampire, but now in Kai's hands, he is no different from a little puppy. Kai suddenly appeared in front of him, and the golden clawed palm grabbed his neck, and then a huge force made Rusfin lose all resistance. Look at me. Rusfin still didn't understand, but he was controlled by someone, so he had no choice. His head was moved in front of Kai, and the ruby eyes on the golden lion helmet suddenly emitted a brilliant light, and then a series of blue-green gorgeous breaths were sucked out of Rusfin's eyes and poured into the ruby eyes. This is the soul devouring technique. Kai learned it from Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh has an ability called the Omniscient Star. With the help of this ability, he doesn't need to study systematically to know any knowledge. Of course, the truth is not so exaggerated. This ability is actually to copy knowledge directly from other people's minds, but it is also very awesome. Perhaps because of the shadow left by the 3 years of college entrance examination and 5 years of simulation in the previous life, Kai likes this ability of memory bred comparable to Doraemon very much. Kai pestered Gilgamesh for a few days before he taught him. However, Gilgamesh is very showy and doesn't like to have the same ability as others, so the version taught to Kai is modified. The version Kai learned is not as sophisticated as Gilgamesh, but very simple and crude. It is to directly extract the knowledge in other people's minds and apply it to oneself. The knowledge that Kai can get is also very fragmented. It is impossible to copy it perfectly like Gilgamesh, and the more advanced the knowledge, the more it cannot be extracted. It is possible to learn language and some very basic knowledge. Not only that, this kind of extraction is definitely not silent. On the contrary, the side effects are very large. The soul of the person being extracted will collapse directly and die. So Kai gave it an evil name. Because of this, Kai rarely uses this spell, because it is unnecessary. Killing a person for some worthless language and knowledge does not conform to Kai's three views. But now it is not possible to take care of it. Besides, these guys are not living people. Undead creatures have no human rights. Soon, Rusfin, whose soul collapsed, was thrown to the ground. Without this soul, the vampire will be wiped out. But Kai didn't care about these at all. How could it be? How could it be? Thousands of years. How could this be possible? I actually slept for thousands of years. Camelot is gone. Arthur is also. How could it be? How could it be? Kai didn't dare to believe the information he got from the vampire. He actually slept for thousands of years. Kai was in the year BC, about 7500 BC. Everything he had was gone. Camelot was gone. Arthur was gone. Morgana, Uther, etc. were gone. Even his friends were gone. From the memory of the vampire, it was learned that the term Asgard had never appeared in the records, and the Sumerian civilization was still just a hypothesis. The Sumerian civilization was proven to be between 1922 and 1934 after World War I. The legend of Olympus is still circulating, but it has become a myth. The ancient Egyptian civilization was even cut off. In other words, everything Kai had disappeared in time. He had almost nothing left. This blow almost made Kai collapse. No, this is not true. Kai subconsciously didn't want to believe it. This was even more ridiculous than time travel. He just slept for a while, and thousands of years had passed? This blow was comparable to when he traveled through time. When he traveled through time, he didn't recover for several years. Boom. Kai was still in chaos here, and the passage that was originally blown down by Kai was actually opened by someone. An extremely strong man smashed a rebel and jumped into the tomb. It was this movement that brought Kai back to his senses. You guys. You're lying to me. Chapter 160 Brawl. Hyde was confused. He didn't know what happened. He just opened the collapsed entrance, but before the smoke and dust in front of him dissipated, he was hit by a lightning column. Fortunately, due to his transformation, Hyde's vitality was extremely strong. So after being hit by the lightning column, although his body was burned all over and the vitreous of both eyes were directly evaporated, he was not in danger of death. However, serious injuries were inevitable, so he could only lie on the ground half dead. Enemy attack. Enemy attack. Steve saw Hyde was blown back as soon as he opened the entrance and entered the tomb. He immediately found a bunker and started to raise his gun to fight back. This is the most intuitive reaction of a soldier. Others are doing similar things. But before they can find a good cover, they see two black shadows rushing out of the tomb. Several people immediately raised their guns and shot, but unfortunately the two people ignored them at all. They would rather be robbed and beaten than stop. Just when the two people were about to turn a corner and disappear in the passage, a golden light shot out from the tomb and shot directly at the two figures. At this time, the shorter of the two figures suddenly grabbed his companion and threw him towards the golden light. Camilla, this was the last words of the unlucky guy before he was blown into powder by the golden light. Unfortunately, his companion was obviously not interested in listening to the wailing of a loser. Before the explosion, she disappeared into the corner without a trace. Boom. After that, the explosion collapsed the passage at the corner, and Cortman and his party were trapped in the passage. What the hell is that? Steve shouted frantically. They are now 200 meters underground. Being trapped here, it is not far from going to hell. Catherine said with a serious face, it's a vampire. Catherine is a member of the Holy Church after all, and she knows all those monsters. But even she didn't expect that vampires would come here. Of course, this is not the point now. Compared to that, I think we need to worry more about the problem in front of us. In Catherine's ugly face, a golden armored giant walked out of the entrance of the tomb. At Catherine's reminder, the group of people mechanically turned their heads to look at the golden armored giant. You all have to die? Kai was a little bit excited at this time, and there was also a vampire, Mina, among this group of people, so Kai didn't think about it at all, and directly regarded these guys as a group of vampires. This is not Kai's fault. After all, his judgment is not wrong in a sense. Even the purpose of these two groups is the same, they are all here to dig his grave. Mina was the first to be attacked, who said she was not a human. The holy spear appeared from the golden ripple light circle. Kai grabbed the holy spear and swung it. The holy spear immediately changed from the form of a knight's spear to a long spear. After the long spear took shape, Kai shook the long spear, and the spear came out like a dragon and pointed directly at Mina's heart. Kai also knew at this time that what he had to deal with was called a vampire. This kind of vampire is not much different from the vampires he saw in movies and TV shows in his previous life. The vital point is the heart. Kai was not very surprised about this. He had seen too many fantasy creatures. Multiple vampires were not a big problem. However, these vampires should be young races, because Kai had never heard of such creatures in the time and space before the Common Era. Facing the spear coming at her, Mina felt an endless fear in her heart. It was a feeling of facing a natural enemy, just like a frog being stared at by a snake, with nowhere to escape and no way to resist. A shrill scream was the last thing Mina could do. Just when Kai's spear was about to pierce Mina, a shield blocked the spear. It was Diana. With Diana's obstruction, Mina, who had escaped death, immediately turned into a sky full of bats and disappeared from the original place. Kai, who was blocked by the shield, naturally could not stop there. The spear suddenly retracted. Kai turned his body, and took advantage of the situation to hit Diana again with a spear. Diana held the shield with one hand and tried to block it, but the power of the spear was so great that Diana's whole body was knocked out until it hit the wall of the passage. But at this time, Kai changed his tactics again. The spear in his hand turned into a spiral sword, and he slashed at Diana with a sweep. It was not convenient to use a spear in such a narrow passage. So Kai changed the weapon form and used a standard length of long sword to meet the enemy. At the same time, the desert fire in his body began to climb up the long sword. With just one sword, Diana's divine shield brought from Paradise Island was cut in half. If Diana hadn't dodged quickly and squatted down in time, the sword just now would have directly beheaded her. Without the shield, Diana could only use the long sword to meet the enemy. Unfortunately, her swordsmanship, which she was proud of, was like a child in front of Kai. After only 5 rounds, the longsword in her hand was picked up by Kai. After picking up the longsword in Diana's hand, Kai immediately put away the sword and turned around, bowed his body slightly, held the longsword in his left hand, pushed the hilt with his right hand, stepped forward with his left leg, and stabbed the longsword, aiming directly at Diana's heart. This process seems slow, but it is actually lightning fast. It was so fast that before anyone else could react, they saw Diana in danger. Witch weaving. Just when everyone else thought Diana was going to die, a cold but charming voice rang out. It was Catherine. She used her hair to summon alien creatures again. A huge magic circle appeared in the void beside Kai. A huge and ferocious beast head, wrapped in hair, emerged from the magic circle and bit Kai, knocking him against the wall. Boom! The huge force shook the entire underground passage, like an earthquake. Diana took this opportunity to roll away from Kai. Everything that had just happened had greatly hit Diana's confidence. Even in Paradise Island, where there were many warriors, Diana was the most talented one. Even when fighting against her mother and aunt, she had never felt so powerless, as if the monster could kill her without any effort. As for her invulnerability, Diana didn't think her body was harder than her shield. On the other side, Kai was bitten by the monster, but he didn't panic at all. The hardness of the second form's body is no joke. The bite force of this monster is indeed outstanding, but it is far from enough to hurt Kai. He is more interested in the woman who summoned this monster. He felt a very familiar breath from this woman. A witch. To be precise, it is the breath of the air of the three-phase goddess. That kind of charming and pure smell can only be found in the air of the three-phase goddess. At this time, Kai's complicated mood also calmed down a little after seeing Catherine. Since the air of the three-phase goddess still exists, he can definitely get some useful information from her. But before that, the little dog biting him must be sent away first. Chapter 161 Outbreak. Most of Kai's body was bitten by the monster, and so was the spiral sword in his hand. Only one of Kai's hands and head were exposed. But Kai was not without a solution. Kai may not have learned much in his life, but he did learn a lot of strange abilities. Holy sword. Kai put his 5 fingers together, used his palm as a sword, and gently waved it at the neck of the monster, which had exposed the magic circle. A slender light flashed, and the monster froze, and then the monster's head gently slid off its neck. Kai actually cut off the monster's neck with his bare hands. This is an ability Kai learned in Olympus, called Holy Sword. It is not a spell, but more like a physical skill. It is a sort of judgment that has cultivated its limbs to the extreme. When it first took shape, it had the power to split the sky and the earth and cut off the planet. When it was cultivated to a higher legendary realm, it could even create the world and split the Milky Way. Of course, these are exaggerated rhetoric. But this ability is indeed very useful, at least in terms of sharpness. It is not inferior to ordinary magic weapons. Kai learned this ability from Pan, the first human-shaped teddy in Olympus. In the sequence of Olympian gods, Pan, the half-human, half-beast god of sheep, is a symbol of creativity, music, poetry and sex, as well as a symbol of panic and nightmare. Although this guy is very ugly, he is very popular with women. He symbolizes the most primitive desire, so he spends most of his time in teddy time. Although the main gods of Olympus have a bad lifestyle in private, they all like to be sanctimonious. In addition, they are almost all obsessed with looks, so they don't like Pan very much. This also led to Pan being very talented, but he could only herd for Zeus and barely got the position of a shepherd. It is also because of this that Olympus has never thought of preparing any artifacts for such a little god. Pan was very dissatisfied with this, so he created a series of physical skills to enhance his strength. To put it bluntly, if the loser has no money to buy luxury equipment, he can only use the dumbest way, Krypton liver, to make up for it. But Pan did become famous, and even taught many heroes. I remember watching a cartoon when I was a kid, Hercules, in which Hercules' teacher was a half-man, half-goat. Although Pan's private life was very unbearable, that was his nature, and he couldn't change it. He was actually a very good person, kind-hearted, talkative, warm-hearted, and helpful. He was good at music and poetry, and it was very comfortable to get along with him. He was one of Kai's few friends in Olympus, at least among the male gods. Apart from him, among the male gods, Kai only had a good relationship with Poseidon. The monster whose head was chopped off by Kai turned into a flying monster and disappeared after a while. This was pretty good, at least it was environmentally friendly. Who are you? What is your relationship with the old religion? Kai did not attack immediately this time, but asked. Unfortunately, Kai made a mistake, that is, he was still speaking ancient Celtic, and none of the people on the opposite side understood it. These people had no idea what Kai was saying. Maybe they thought Kai was swearing. Of course, it was mainly because Kai's appearance was too rough, which made these people very nervous. When Kai stopped attacking, these people just thought it was a good opportunity to attack. And no one would miss this good opportunity. Mr. Hyde, who had been pretending to be dead for a long time, had recovered his ability to move with his strong recovery ability, and even his blind eyes were restored. Dr. Hyde was also angry now. He didn't do anything, but he was beaten so badly. A good man can also be angry. So he simply handed over the control of his body to the more irritable Mr. Hyde, and Mr. Hyde was completely a violent maniac. Seeing someone who hurt him, it was naturally impossible for him to stop and chat. So when Kai was asking questions, Mr. Hyde suddenly jumped up, clenched his hands, and hit Kai's back with a fist, knocking Kai back to the tomb. Steve and Cortman were not slow either. As soon as Kai was knocked away, the guns in their hands opened fire crazily, and Steve threw grenades in Kai's direction without paying. Captain Nemo also got involved. Because he was seriously injured before, although he was bandaged by Dr. Hyde and did not die, it was difficult for him to join the battle. He could only hide in the corner and watch the battle nervously. The three women were more fierce than each other. Although Mina was very timid at the beginning, she could also provide a lot of firepower after pulling away. The vampire queen made herself green-faced and fanged, her mouth open to her chest, and issued the most powerful banshee howl. This ability is a very advanced ability for vampires. It is said that this scream can directly pull a person's soul into hell. Diana has no long-range attack means and can only stand in the front row as a meat shield. And Catherine has the most output. The witch recited a spell, and 2 magic circles appeared on the muzzle of her gun. After the blessing of the magic circle, her bullets have the power comparable to artillery. With everyone working together, the tomb where Kai was blown down directly. The rubble and smoke blocked their sight for a moment, but they didn't dare to stop attacking. They didn't stop attacking until they ran out of bullets and grenades in their guns. Steve swallowed his saliva and said carefully, "Is that monster, Dead, Cortman took out the empty shells from the gun and refilled the gun with ammunition, saying, "That's not a monster, it should be Kai himself." Steve turned his head and looked at Cortman with an incredible look on his face. "Are you sure? Combined with the legend, it should be." Cortman's face was very sour. Those characters in the legend of King Arthur were extremely noble to the British, but they fought with such characters. It would be strange if he was in a good mood. What's more, one of their goals this time was to see if they could wake up Kai as the legend said, and then help Britain win the war. But now, Cortman didn't know whether Kai would help Britain, but they would definitely not be in a good mood. "So, we just had a fight with an ancient English legendary hero? And, are you sure the thing?" Steve didn't have a good impression of Kai at all, so he almost blurted out the word "the thing," but fortunately he reacted quickly and immediately changed his words. "Is that thing really made in England? Can your ancient English knights cast magic? Oh, and his weapon can actually transform? Are you sure it's not an alien product? Be careful. He's coming." Catherine suddenly interrupted Steve's complaint. As soon as Catherine's voice fell, a golden light broke through the gravel and smoke and appeared in front of everyone again. It was Kai. He was unscathed, his body was as bright as new, and there was not even any dust. If there was any change, it was that he had an extra shield in his hand. "It's Aegis." Diana couldn't help but shout when she saw the shield. This shield is really famous in Olympus. According to legend, the shield Aegis is Zeus's artifact, and later gave it to Athena. Diana was originally a descendant of the Olympus civilization, so it was not surprising that she could recognize it. Before Diana had time to figure out why the Aegis appeared in England, Kai moved. A golden rippling halo appeared behind him, and a gorgeous long sword poked out from it. Then, before everyone could react to what it was for, the long sword turned into golden light and shot at Catherine. They had just seen this thing, which not only killed a vampire, but also blew up a section of the passage. Catherine immediately fired a gun to intercept the golden light, but unfortunately the speed of the golden light was much faster than she thought. But just when Catherine thought she was dead, the golden light exploded at a distance from her. Catherine was blown away directly, and finally hit the wall of the passage and fainted. This explosion was obviously much less powerful, more like a premeditated fixed-point explosion. Kai did not want to kill the witch, he needed her to give him the information he wanted. But the others didn't know. They were so nervous that they didn't have time to think carefully. They just thought that their companions were killed in the explosion like the vampire. "No. You deserve to die." Diana's reaction was the biggest. Perhaps this female warrior had the simplest personality. She easily projected too much emotion on others. In her mind, although Catherine was not familiar with her, she was her companion. Since she was a companion, she had to protect her, even if it meant sacrificing her own life. Very stupid, but likable. Such people are often the protagonists in various novels, and those who exploded are such people. Diana was the same. The sacrifice of her companions stimulated Diana's pure heart. Anger, guilt, sadness, and the determination to protect the remaining companions surged into her heart. Diana suddenly felt a force filing her body. Of course, this girl didn't care so much at this time. She just rushed towards Kai angrily. She crossed her hands and bumped into Kai. The pair of silver bracelets on her hands also emitted a flame-like light in the process. This change made Kai raise his eyebrows. This power gave Kai a familiar taste. Kai raised the spiral sword in his hand and chopped it down fiercely at Diana. Clang. The sound of the silver bracelet and the spiral sword colliding made the rest of the people hold their heads. The collision seemed to happen in their heads, giving them splitting headaches. Mina was a little better, so she quickly summoned a group of shadow bats to support Diana. Her actions did not escape Kai's eyes. Kai used one hand to suppress Diana, and then kicked Diana away with a whip kick. Then he thought about it, and a rippling light circle appeared beside him, and a golden light shot towards Mina from it. This time Kai did not hold back. Undead creatures like vampires have no preferential treatment from Kai. Mina wanted to use the bats she summoned to block the golden light. But the bats disappeared as soon as they approached the golden light, and they were completely useless. Seeing that Mina was about to follow in Catherine's footsteps, Diana exploded again. She was kicked into the air, but at this critical moment, she actually flew up, and then kicked the wall of the passage with her feet. The whole person rushed out like an arrow, blocking the golden light and Mina. No, Diana crossed her arms, trying to block the blow with a silver bracelet. Her muscles were tense, veins were exposed, and she burst out all her strength. Boom! A golden red shock wave burst out from Diana's body. This power was so strong that even Diana couldn't control it. The shock wave she sent was all round. Her companions were also affected and all knocked unconscious. Kai was not spared and was also knocked away by this power. But it was also this shock wave that made Kai finally remember why he was so familiar with this power. This is the power of Olympus. Kai didn't expect that he could actually meet the gods of Olympus. The knowledge he got from the vampire before clearly said that Olympus had disappeared, and even civilization was lost. Chapter 162 Historical Truth. After an unknown amount of time, Diana finally woke up. After that explosion, Diana fainted very naturally. The first reaction of Diana after waking up was to sit up and look for her friends, but the strong dizziness almost made her fall back again. It felt like she had drunk fake wine. Diana felt dizzy, the whole world was spinning, and her body was weak. "Are you awake?" A hand supported Diana, and Diana barely sat up. "Catherine." Only then did Diana notice the owner of the hand. "You are okay." Diana had always thought that Catherine had died, and now seeing that her companion was still alive, Diana's originally nervous heart was a little relieved. Immediately, Diana asked anxiously, "Are there others?" Catherine shook her head. Seeing Catherine shaking her head, Diana's heart tightened, and she was afraid of the worst situation. As a result, Catherine gasped and pointed to the other side. Steve and his group were lying there neatly. Although they could not see the specific situation, they were at least not in danger of life from the rise and fall of their chests. "They are fine, they just fainted, not in danger of life," Catherine said softly. Diana finally breathed a sigh of relief. After relaxing, the dizziness and weakness came to her again. Catherine saw that Diana's condition was not good, so she planned to use magic to heal and help her, but was stopped by someone. "You'd better not touch her now. This situation is good for her." Diana looked over and found that it was a man she didn't know. The man was dressed in ancient night clothes, with his back to them, standing next to a mural. "Who is he?" Diana asked while enduring the weakness of her body. Catherine opened her mouth and finally whispered, "He is Kai Knight." She originally planned to introduce Kai in a more solemn way, such as Kai's many titles, but in the previous communication, Catherine already knew that Kai did not like those messy titles. According to Kai, those titles were like the names used in clown shows, very silly. Kai, if Diana was not in a weak period, she would have jumped up at this moment. By the way, her excitement further aggravated her physical weakness, and then she fell into Catherine's arms again. At this time, Kai finally turned around. His long flaxen hair, aqua blue pupils, and handsome face gave people a feeling as warm as the sun. In contrast to his warm appearance, his eyebrows were calm and serious. This made him look mature overall. Although he looked very young, he always gave people the feeling of a handsome uncle. At this moment, Kai's aqua blue eyes revealed a deep sadness. Diana was also stunned when she saw Kai's appearance. Kai's appearance before had left a deep impression on Diana. In her subconscious, Diana imagined Kai as a big, strong, and irritable man, similar to Hercules. The sadness in Kai's eyes made Diana's previous bad feelings towards him disappear. This was not because Diana was obsessed with his face, but because Diana felt that with such a warm-hearted man, he couldn't be that bad. "I'll take you away, here. I want to be alone for a while." In this way, Diana and her group were inexplicably sent away from the mausoleum. After that, they stayed in the manor on the ground. Because they didn't know whether their mission was completed. So they could only stay on the ground and wait for news. Until the evening of a week later, Kai came to the manor. In the living room of the manor castle, Kai sat on the sofa and looked at the group of people in front of him. "Don't be so restrained, I won't hurt you." Kai looked at these people who were so nervous that they were dying, and the atmosphere was dull, so he could only speak first. These people couldn't help but be nervous. Let's not talk about anything else. Just saying that they almost died in the hands of the person in front of them was enough to keep them nervous. Not to mention, the person in front of them was too special. In terms of age, everyone present had to call him the ancestor. In terms of status, the person in front of him was a famous ancient legendary hero in the entire Western world. Not to mention them, even if the King of England and the Emperor of Germany came, they would have to bow their heads and recognize him as a younger brother. In the end, it was Diana who spoke first. She was relatively normal. Her mother was also thousands of years old and had seen the world. "You know, Are you really Kai? Although Catherine and Kai had communicated, Kai also admitted his identity. But the problem was that no one had confirmed it with their own eyes at the time. Diana asked this question, which satisfied everyone's curiosity. Kai smiled at this question. Although sleeping for 1,000 years was not a surprise to Kai himself, it must be said that this feeling was really wonderful. It was really a subtle experience to become the most senior person in the world inexplicably. I can only say that my name is Kai. As for whether I am the person you are talking about, I am not sure. When the others were unconscious, Kai talked with a witch named Catherine, and learned some legends about himself from her. It must be said that legends can't be believed too much. At least many of the deeds in those legends were not done by Kai. For example, the War of Unification of England. When Kai fell into deep sleep, Arthur was still a prince, and he had never ascended the throne. What's more ridiculous is that it is said that he died in that battle. Kai was speechless when he heard it. When did he die? In short, Kai always treated those legends as jokes. With Diana's opening, the others also had the courage to speak. They all asked Kai questions of their interest. Kai meditated in the mausoleum for a week, and his mood was much calmer. Kai seemed very patient with their questions. In fact, this kind of communication is also a kind of information collection for Kai, and Kai naturally would not refuse. Soon, a group of people had a general understanding of some things. King Arthur existed. In ancient times, there was a glorious civilization on this island, and it was the Celts who created it. Regarding the legend of King Arthur, Kai told an unprecedented version, at least a version before King Arthur ascended the throne. Before Kai fell into deep sleep, Arthur had not ascended the throne yet, and he didn't know what happened afterwards. But Kai still gave a few explosive materials. For example, Merlin was not Gandalf the Whitebird, but a handsome young man, and Arthur's attendant. For another example, King Arthur had never been adopted, but Kai was raised by King Uther since he was a child. And Kai also got a lot of information. First of all, the current era. Kai combined the memories he got from the vampires, the stories told by Cotman and others, and some of his own historical knowledge. It is roughly understood that it should be the First World War. And this world is not much different from the world what Kai used to be, and many historical events match. Of course, there are also differences, such as the people in front of him. Kai is sure that these people could not appear in his previous world. From this, Kai determined that this should be the so-called parallel world. After chatting for about 2 hours, Steve finally lost his temper. He was always thinking about the mission. Ahem, Steve coughed twice, attracting everyone's attention. Then he said to Kai very solemnly, "Your Highness the Duke." They learned from Kai's story that Kai was canonized as a duke by King Uther, so Steve said so. No need to be so formal, after all. Camelot has disappeared. Just call me by my name. At this point, Kai's heart was also gloomy. He still felt very complicated about his 1,000-year sleep. Okay, Kai, Steve also followed suit. You can't ask an American to strictly follow the etiquette of the nobility. After all, he is just a colonist. We now formally request you to help us defeat the darkness of this world. Please allow me to refuse. But no one expected that Kai rejected this proposal very decisively. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 163, Deception and Divinity. Why? You are a legendary hero. How can you sit back and watch the world destroyed by war? Steve hadn't figured out how to persuade him yet, but Diana exploded first. After 2 hours of communication, Diana had a very good impression of Kai. Kai was gentle and polite to others. Although he was very serious, he was not a rigid and heavy person. He was very polite and friendly to everyone. He even apologized for his previous impulse, and the reason why they were able to recover so quickly was that Kai treated them when they were in a coma. When he was exchanging martial arts experience with Diana, he also gave her advice very generously, all of which made Diana have a good impression of Kai. Originally, Diana thought he would be in the same group with them, but now Kai decisively refused. Because this is not my war, my era has passed, Kai saw this very clearly. The British, French and Germans fighting, what does it have to do with him? He has no position to participate in it. But, those who suffered because of the war need you to save them. Diana immediately gave a reason. No. You are wrong, Diana. They don't need me to save them. The ones who should save them are the guys who started this war. It was those guys who started the war and made their people suffer. As long as they are willing to stop the war, everything will be solved. Kai still refused. Kai is just a knight. Camelot has disappeared in the long river of history. He is no longer a duke, and he is no longer a ruling class. What else can he do? Should he tell the ruling class of the Allied powers and the Central powers that he is Kai, a legendary hero, and everyone should give me face and stop the war? Don't be funny. Don't say that he is just an antique from thousands of years ago. Even if he is the biological father of the ruling class, don't even think about it. But this war is caused by Ares, the god of war. If he is not eradicated, humans will still fall into war. We need your power to deal with Ares. Diana blurted out the biggest purpose of her coming to the human world. Diana still believes that the current world war is caused by Ares. Because in her opinion, no matter how crazy humans are, they will not start a war that can destroy themselves. The others covered their faces. It was obvious that Diana had also introduced this theory to them. But just looking at their expressions, it was clear that they didn't believe it at all. In fact, up to now, no one believed that there was a so-called god of war Ares. What? Who are you talking about? God of war Ares? This bastard is still alive. Kai was more shocked than them. They didn't believe in the existence of a god of war, but Kai knew Ares himself. As soon as Kai said this, the group of people were shocked again. You know the god of war Ares? Diana said what they wanted to say on their behalf. Well, we do know each other, but we're not very familiar with each other. No, I should say that our relationship is quite bad. The relationship between them was indeed not good. Originally, the relationship between Kai and Ares should have been neither hot nor cold. Kai couldn't stand Ares' look of looking down on everyone, and Ares didn't like a mortal like Kai. But although the two of them didn't like each other, they didn't have any conflicts. But didn't Kai have a bad relationship with Hera? Because of this, Zeus and Hera were very unhappy. Ares thought that all this was Kai's fault and had chased Kai several times. At that time, Kai was a little guilty about destroying other people's couples' feelings, so Ares came to him several times, but he didn't kill him, but just taught him a lesson. Anyway, Ares is also his godson. Of course, Kai will not tell others about this, it's too embarrassing. In Kai's concept, people who destroy other people's marriages are definitely not good people. Then you should help us defeat the Germans. Ares, the god of war, is with the Germans. Steve also seized the opportunity to persuade him at this time. Steve still doesn't believe in the god of war Ares, but since Kai believes in it, that's great. Anyway, there is already a Diana, and there is nothing wrong with having another Kai. Unfortunately, as soon as he said this, Kai looked at him like an idiot. Did this guy think he had never been to junior high school? He still knew how the First World War happened. Wasn't it just a dog-eat-dog fight between imperialists, fighting for colonies and markets? What the hell does this have to do with Ares, the god of war? Although I don't know how you are sure that this war was caused by Ares, I can tell you responsibly that Ares Jedi does not have the ability to start such a large-scale war. According to the facts I know, this war is completely a war launched by the two major military groups for their own interests. How can it be related to Ares? Why is Kai unwilling to participate in the war? It's because both sides of the war are not good people. If he wants to stop the war, he must be the executioner of the other side. Kai has eaten too much and wants to get involved in such disgusting things? Steve didn't expect Kai to keep up with the times. He is a spy, not a soldier, so he naturally can't be fooled by the things in the propaganda materials. He can understand why the two major military groups went to war, but this does not affect his fooling others. By the way, he didn't fool Diana, because Diana didn't need to be fooled at all. Others came to the pole on their own. No. It's Ares. I can feel his breath. We Amazons and Ares the god of war are mortal enemies. Our duty is to stop him from harming the world. I can be sure it's him. Diana was still stubborn. Wait. Ares. But Kai's focus was no longer on Ares. He always thought that Diana was a survivor of Olympus, just like Catherine, whose ancient bloodline was circulated in the world. The reason why Kai deliberately showed mercy to Catherine before was because Catherine had the blood of the three-phase goddess. Kai wanted to learn from her the truth about why Camelot disappeared. Kai learned from the vampire's memory that the development of history was even stranger than he imagined. There was a huge fault between the history that Kai knew and the history that the vampire knew. In this fault, whether it was the ancient Celtic civilization, Sumerian civilization, Asgard civilization or ancient Egyptian civilization, they all disappeared, leaving only some seemingly plausible legends, and all other traces disappeared. According to Kai's understanding of these civilizations, even if their civilizations were really cut off, they would definitely not leave no trace at all. There must be something he doesn't know. But Catherine didn't give him the answer he wanted, because Catherine didn't know what the Trinity Goddess was, let alone that the ancient Celtic civilization really existed. As for the truth of the historical fault, there was no way to know. In the end, Kai concluded that Catherine just accidentally awakened the blood of the Trinity Goddess, and she didn't know the true origin of her origin. After that, Kai took it for granted that Diana was the same. But now Diana told him that she was an Amazon. Yep. What's the problem? Diana said. Impossible. Amazons can't have divinity. The divinity in you can't be faked. You have the blood of the Olympian gods. You are obviously a demigod, the lifestyle of the gods in Olympus. Let's not talk about it. They have too many offspring who are half human and half god. Even most of the lower-level soldiers in Olympus have the blood of demigods. The only difference between Diana and them is that she has awakened divinity and has the qualifications to become a god. Her awakening was completed right in front of Kai. Otherwise, given Kai's mental state at the time, these guys would have died long ago. It would have been impossible for them to last until Kai calmed down. Amazons are not as strong as you. These feminists are at most a little stronger than ordinary people. Kai knew the Amazons well. These women were the earliest feminists among humans, and they were quite extreme. These women completely treated men as reproductive tools and killed them after giving birth. Kai didn't like these extremists, so he didn't have much friendship with Amazons. Now it was Diana's turn to be confused. I have divinity? How is that possible? Diana always thought that she was different because of a few pieces of divine equipment. Kai looked at her and decided that it would be more reliable to produce evidence to avoid wasting time. He directly took out the Aegis from the king's treasury. I remember you recognized Aegis. I can tell you that this shield was given to me by Athena. I am very familiar with the Olympian gods, and I will not be wrong. Diana picked up the shield Aegis, and the more she looked at it, the more confused she became, because this shield was exactly the same as the one recorded in the Amazon classics. This is undoubtedly the best evidence. But the problem is that her mother once said that she was made of clay. It was because of the blessing of the gods that she became the child of the Amazon queen Hippolyta. The people around looked at this scene as if they were listening to a myth. Especially Steve. He always believed that the so-called gods, gods of war, and the like mentioned by Diana were the result of the unique environment of Paradise Island and fanatical religious beliefs. To put it bluntly, it was the superiority of the self-proclaimed civilized people over the backward natives of Amazon. But now, someone told him that everything was true and he knew those gods. Steve felt that his three views were impacted. Cortman thought a little too much, and he was more curious now. What was going on with Kai, who is obviously a native of ancient England? Why did he know the ancient gods far away in Greece? Mr. Hyde and Captain Nemo were similar to Steve. Their worldviews were severely impacted. They were atheists. Even though they knew Mina, the vampire queen, they didn't really believe in the existence of gods. But now, it's hard to describe. So for a moment, everyone present fell into an unspeakable silence. If the soldiers in the manor hadn't delivered a message saying that the King of England wanted to see them, no one knew how long this silence would last. Chapter 164, Audience with the King. Because of the King of England's summons, the group decided to take the train to London overnight. On the train, everyone was thinking about their own things, and no one was looking forward to the King's summons. Among them, Diana was the most shocked. She was in a mess now. She learned from Kai that she was not made of clay. Kai told her responsibly that it was impossible for Olympus to make a living person out of clay. Then the question came, is she the daughter of Queen Hippolyta? Who are Diana's biological parents? She wanted to go back to Paradise Island to find the truth. But her strong sense of responsibility made her unable to give up the task in front of her. For every minute that Ares, the god of war, existed in the world, hundreds of people would die for it. She couldn't let go of these innocent lives. So on the train, Diana was always struggling with this matter. Others were not calm either. What they had experienced in the past few days was enough for them to reshape their three views, and many of the things they had insisted on before were shaken. Only Cortman was calm because he had experienced enough in his life. As for Kai, he started reading books to recharge himself from the moment he got on the train. He needs to understand the era and world he lives in. Just like he did when he traveled to Camelot, collect information, evaluate the environment he lives in, and then determine what he should do. The first thing is naturally the legend of King Arthur. Although he has learned about the legend of King Arthur from Cortman, he still needs more information, because those are just legends, and there must be many fallacies in them. He is eager to know what Arthur and his friends encountered after he fell asleep. Fortunately, there are many books about the legend of King Arthur in the UK. People in this country seem to regard the legend of King Arthur as the myth of their own nation. But after reading a lot of books, Kai found that the British are really interesting. They, a group of Anglo-Saxons, actually regard Celtic mythology as the culture of their own nation. It's enough. What's more ridiculous is that many Christian elements have been added to the legend of King Arthur. In their time, there were no Jews, so where did Christianity come from? It was also these messy things that made the legend even more vague. But Kai finally determined some things, such as Arthur's queen, Guinevere. When Kai saw this name for the first time, he thought about it for a long time. He couldn't remember which country's princess had this name at that time. According to the records in many books, this Guinevere was the princess of King Liudecun. But the problem is that Kai has never heard of any King Liudecun. As a qualified Camelot knight, Kai is very good at heraldry and knows the royal families of various countries very well. He swore that he had never heard of this king. Later, Kai found a clue from the spelling of the word Guinevere. Although the spelling and pronunciation of English are different from those of ancient Celtic, their pronunciations are very similar. After all, they are all Indo-European languages. Guinevere, Guinevere. If you read it in a row like this, Kai really doesn't recognize this name, but if you separate it, Kai is very familiar with it. Gwen Neville. Isn't the black girl Gwen's last name Neville? For this discovery, Kai's heart is really a bit mixed. Arthur's unlucky child actually married a rolling girl. In addition to this, what made Kai even more crazy was that Lancelot was still having an affair with Gwen. This was not the end. The reason why King Arthur died was, on the one hand, because Lancelot and Gwen's affair split the Knights of the Round Table. On the other hand, his half-sister Morgana was involved in the rebellion of Mordred. Mordred also killed King Arthur himself. Kai really found a lot of familiar names. Especially Morgana. Kai thought something was wrong at first. He never thought that Morgana would hurt Arthur. The relationship between them was obviously very good. But he turned over many versions of King Arthur's legend and found that Morgana played a negative role in them. In short, all these made Kai feel very frustrated. Because he found that he could not change anything. He knew that Arthur would be betrayed and even cause the collapse of the empire built by Arthur. He clearly tried very hard to change. He taught Arthur kung fu and helped him eliminate all threats, but in the end, he still didn't change anything. This reminded Kai of a sentence Sali Jen said to him. Those who try to change their fate will be retaliated by fate. Kai never believed in fate, but at this moment, he really felt the impermanence of fate. The next morning, Kai and his group were invited by the royal family to Buckingham Palace in Westminster. Here, King George V of England summoned them accompanied by the royal etiquette minister and Reverend Dalton. For Cortman and others, George V just conducted a simple summons and chat as a routine. The process was very brief, and basically everyone only said a few words. It was just that when it came to Cortman, it took a little longer. King George V of England loved adventure when he was young, and was even called the Sailor Prince. Before he accidentally ascended the throne, he had been serving in the Navy. During his time in the Navy, he traveled almost half of the world, and even rebelliously tattooed a red and blue dragon tattoo on his arm. George V's experience is also very interesting. George V's brother, Prince Albert, was originally the second in line to the throne. The first in line was their father, and his grandmother was still in power at the time. As a result, Prince Albert died of pneumonia unexpectedly 6 weeks after the official announcement of the engagement, so George V had to take over. By the way, he also married his sister-in-law who had not yet married. What's more, his brother and his sister-in-law were in a love triangle, and the two brothers almost fell out over this. So George V was very interested in Cortman, the famous adventurer. When it was Kai's turn, he was treated differently, but this treatment made Kai feel amused. It turned out that George V was a super fan of King Arthur. He even placed a large round table in his living room in imitation of King Arthur. He was even more enthusiastic about Kai. At the beginning, he asked various questions to confirm Kai's true identity. Kai was tired of being asked, so he simply used the second form. When Kai, in the form of a golden lion, stood in front of George V, this guy immediately turned into a dog, flattering Kai in various ways, constantly expressing how much he admired Arthur and Kai, and even because of his too rude attitude, the royal etiquette minister had to ask others to leave. The king was rude, but the key was that it could not be seen by outsiders. Facing all kinds of flattery and worship from George V, although Kai was a little embarrassed on his face, he was still very happy in his heart. Of course, Kai did not get carried away. After all, Kai had been a duke. Although he had only been a duke for a few days, he knew very well that a qualified ruler could not be so unreliable. Sure enough, after a period of flattery and worship, the drama came. George V constantly emphasized that King Arthur was the spiritual pillar of Britain, and his chivalry influenced generations of British people. It was because of King Arthur's spirit that they were not afraid of sacrifice to resist the tyranny of the Germans. In order to prevent the world from falling into the tyranny of the Germans, they were willing to die to prevent the Germans from bringing the world under their rule. Blah blah blah. This inexplicable speech made Kai feel very embarrassed. Damn. You British and Germans are fighting for world hegemony, what does it have to do with Arthur? To be honest, if Arthur were still alive, you, the King of England, would probably have nothing to do with him. Because the current Britain is not England ruled by the Celts, but a country of Germans, Anglo-Saxons are a branch of Germans. To be honest, the Scots and Welsh are descendants of the Celts. Chapter 165 The British's Plot. While George V was constantly trying to win over Kay, Reverend Dalton was secretly observing Kay's expression and analyzing his attitude. It turned out that their initial idea was useless. Reverend Dalton, although he was a priest of the Church of England, was actually very complicated. First of all, he was George V's teacher. Not only George V, but also George V's deceased brother Prince Albert was Dalton's student. At the same time, he was also the private priest of the royal family and had a very close relationship with the royal family. Secondly, he was also the head of the Cathedral Church. The Cathedral Church is a very old organization in the UK. Its predecessor can be traced back to the time of Alfred the Great. At that time, it was just a night organization used to secretly protect the safety of the royal family and Christian missionaries and maintain the ruling status of the Anglo-Saxons. Later, it gradually evolved into hunting down supernatural creatures hidden in the dark. Finally, he also served as the head of the Royal Intelligence Department. Although the Royal Intelligence Department does not belong to the government sequence on the surface, it has a strong connection with regular intelligence departments such as MI6, and even has the right to command those intelligence departments. Because of this complex identity, although Pastor Dalton is insignificant on the surface, he actually has a pivotal position in both the British aristocracy and the British government. As early as a week ago, Dalton learned about Kai's situation through Catherine's report. Since then, he has begun to negotiate and plan with some core government personnel regarding Kai's appearance. The appearance of Kai, for the ruling elite like them, is definitely not just the resurrection of a historical figure. Behind Kai, they see huge benefits. First of all, the wealth in Kai's tomb is of great significance to the current British government. The outbreak of war was something the British government had long anticipated, and they had made a lot of preparations for it, including armaments and financial reserves. But when the war really broke out, the British government found that their preparations were useless. They did not expect the war to reach its current level. The British government seriously underestimated the scale of the war and had no clear understanding of the severity of the war before the war. When the war broke out, Britain's fiscal reserves evaporated rapidly, and Britain's industrial system was not enough to support the consumption of the war. So in order to ensure the smooth progress of the war, Britain had to turn to the United States for help. This made Britain, the world's largest creditor country before the war, quickly become a debtor country. It can be said that Britain is now short of everything, but the most lacking is gold. Because during the war, paper money is useless, and others only accept gold. Without gold, Britain's most basic materials such as arms, food, medicine, coal, etc. will be affected. The war has rapidly increased Britain's demand for American materials and goods, stimulating the prosperity of the U.S. economy. More importantly, it is the gold reserves linked to the pound that quickly flowed to the United States. The UK was still implementing the gold standard at this time. The consequences of this are extremely serious and may even affect the position of the pound in international settlements. So the batch of gold owned by K is extremely important to them. Although they have not yet estimated how much gold K has, according to Catherine's description, this batch of gold is definitely much more than the current reserves of the Bank of England. Secondly, Kai's own value is also very high. As the war progresses, the Allies and the Central Powers have done everything they can. All kinds of tricks that can be put on the table have long been used, and the private tricks are endless. Now, Germany has begun to break the bottom line. Remember Ludendorff's Viper Commando? This is Germany's effort to break the deadlock. According to the intelligence of the British Intelligence Department, this so-called commando is not a biological and chemical force at all, or in other words, this force does not rely solely on biological and chemical weapons to influence the war. The feedback from various aspects shows that the Germans have begun to contact those ancient dark creatures in Europe. For this reason, the Germans have ignored the interests of their ally, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. During this period of time, the southern region of the Austro-Hungarian Empire has become a carnival for various dark creatures. Vampires, wizards, werewolves and other dark creatures began to appear frequently in Eastern Europe and Southern Europe. If the Germans or those dark creatures are placed in front of the Allies alone, the Allies are not very afraid, especially those dark creatures, who can only hide in the dark for so many years and can't make any waves at all. But the problem is that if the two are added together, it will be different. The combination of Germany's industrial and technological strength plus dark creatures is scary to the Allies. So in order to curb such a combination, the Allies must counterattack. In fact, the counterattack has already begun. During this period of time, the Allies have had very active contacts with the Vatican. The Vatican cannot tolerate the rampant dark creatures, so they are willing to cooperate with the Allies. At the same time, the Vatican is also very happy to mediate secret negotiations between Italy and the Allies. But no one has too many countermeasures. So there was the development of K's tomb. It's just that the result of the development far exceeded the expectations of the British side. I didn't expect K to be alive. I didn't expect that K's strength was so strong. According to the assessment obtained from Catherine's report, Dalton and a group of government leaders hope that K can be used by the British government. To put it bluntly, they want K's money and want K to be their knife. But from the current situation, things are not as smooth as they imagined. K is not interested in the British government's recruitment at all. The royal family and the people hope that you can lead us to fight against tyranny at this moment. George V said a lot of things, but the core meaning was actually just this one sentence. Of course, this sentence is still very watery. What lead them to fight against tyranny? Bullshit. If Kai really stood up and wanted to lead them, they would probably be the first to stand up and oppose. Kai went to lead the people to fight against tyranny. What are they doing? Being led by Kai? Don't dream. Kai doesn't like this kind of hypocrisy, but it doesn't mean he doesn't understand. Kai's rich experience has given him enough life wisdom. Excuse me, Your Majesty. You said so much, but I still can't hear what this war has to do with me. Although I'm sorry, I still have to say that you may have some misunderstandings about me because of those legends. I am not a savior, and I don't intend to be a savior. I only fight for my country, but now, my country has disappeared, and I have no reason to fight. When Kai said this, although he was lost, he unconsciously had a thought in his mind. That is to return to China. He had gone through a lot of trouble to return to the east, but at that time, the road to the east was blocked by a mysterious force, which made his wish to return to his homeland come to nothing. But now it is different. Although Kai is still unclear about the situation of the ancient continent in the east, he knows from the few words of courtmen and others that the ancient country has already had contact with the outside world. After learning about this situation, Kai wondered if he could return to China. Although the time point is a bit early, according to the history of parallel time and space, this is the darkest time for China. If Kai goes back, he may be able to make a little contribution to the country he loves so much, so that China in this time and space will no longer experience those darkness, and it may be able to rise earlier and faster. Chapter 166 for the future of humanity. But you are British. The country needs you now. George V obviously has not yet broken away from the legends. In the minds of most British people, King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table are British. Even in many legends, Arthur is still a hero of the Anglo-Saxons fighting against a Roman invasion. I have seen a movie before, which is about Arthur fighting against the rule of the Romans. George V's words made Kai stunned, and then Kai laughed. Your Majesty, you would say such a thing, which means you must not have studied seriously. Kai pointed at George V and said, you are Anglo-Saxon, and I am Celtic. If it is really strict, you and your country are invaders in my eyes. On the contrary, you and the Germans are relatives. These are what Kai saw in a book that researched the era of King Arthur. The book speculated that King Arthur lived around 500 AD. In this book, the historical background of Arthur's time is described in great detail. Although most of the influences are nonsense, some things are indeed very interesting. For example, Great Britain was still occupied by foreigners, first the Romans, and then in the early 5th century, after the Romans withdrew, the Anglo-Saxons living near the mouth of the Elbe River in Germany and southern Denmark, as well as Germanic tribes such as the Jutes from the lower reaches of the Rhine came to Britain. Simply put, the Celts, as indigenous peoples, were a punching bag. Modern British people have two major ethnic origins, the Germans and the Celts. The former are conquerors and the latter are conquered. This discovery made Kai extremely unhappy. Although Kai has always been a Chinese, he has been a Celt for 10 to 20 years. So he still feels unhappy that his Celtic descendants are so weak. Hearing Kai's words, George V was like a chicken grabbed by the neck, and he was speechless. He was a king, not a historian, so it was naturally impossible for him to know that King Arthur was a Celt. He just persuaded Kai to join their camp according to his habit. But now he found that he seemed to have made a mistake. What he needs to worry about now is not whether Kai will join the United Kingdom, but whether Kai will get together with Scottish separatists and split Scotland from the United Kingdom. After all, in terms of blood relationship, Kai is undoubtedly closer to Scotland. You should know that Scotland was not merged into the Kingdom of Great Britain by the Kingdom of England until 1707, and the separatist sentiment there has always been very strong. Even in later generations, there has been a split. What if it is a war for the future of mankind? At this time, Reverend Dalton, who was the king's advisor and teacher, finally spoke. Tisk, Kai didn't believe such a statement at all. The war between the British and the Germans was essentially a war between two countries for their own interests. They wanted to seize world hegemony. What does this have to do with the future of mankind? Is Britain, as the world hegemon, good to the world? The colonial policy of these British guys can't see any good. Seeing Kai's disdainful look, Dalton frowned. He has always believed that ancient people are simple and easy to fool. Especially since Kai's a knight. In Dalton's impression, knights are all reckless men with poor brains and chivalrous patience. But he didn't expect that Kai in front of him was very sober from beginning to end. I know that you are not interested in the war that is going on now. Indeed, this war was originally caused by the conflict of interests between us and the Germans. The Germans want to redivide their sphere of influence and want more colonies, and these have nothing to do with you. But what if this war has deviated from its original trajectory? Dalton did not lie. The Germans have already made a desperate bet for victory in the war. What do you mean? Kai asked. He heard from Dalton's words that the First World War in this world seemed to be a little different from the First World War in Kane's time and space. The Germans have gone crazy. In order to win the war, they actually started to cooperate with the dark creatures on the European continent. Werewolves, vampires, wizards, devil worshippers, these scourges that were originally in the dark, have begun to appear openly in Europe with the support of the Germans. We have received intelligence that in order to let these monsters help them, the Germans are even willing to divide a piece of land in Europe so that those monsters can appear openly. At this point, Pastor Dalton's attitude immediately became fierce. The Germans are endangering the future of mankind. Those monsters have been suppressed in the corners of darkness. Once they are allowed to appear in front of the world, the disaster they bring will be absolutely immeasurable. I don't ask you to fight for the interests of the British Empire, but we ask you to fight for the interests of mankind. These words are righteous, and although Kai seems to care about nothing, he is still a bit nationalistic in his bones, otherwise he would not have been obsessed with his motherland until now. Kai's attitude towards the nation is like this, let alone the issue of humans and aliens. This is a natural position. However, Kai did not immediately agree to Dalton's request. After all, the British were notorious troublemakers in history. There were too many countries and people who were badly screwed by them. So Kai was cautious about Dalton's words, The British may not be good at other things, but they are absolutely first class at digging holes and burying people, harming others and not benefiting themselves, so Kay did not want the topic to be controlled by Dalton all the time. This would be very disadvantageous to him, so he cunningly led the topic to other places. Kay first put aside the issue of joining the war, and instead proposed that he hoped to buy the manor above the mausoleum from the royal family. Kay knew very well that he was placed in the mausoleum before Sejan when he was sleeping. And the mausoleum was the old site of Camelot, so Kay hoped to buy all the land above the mausoleum. George V was very hesitant about Kay's request. The reason was obvious. They were still thinking about the huge amount of wealth in the mausoleum. If George V sold the manor and the surrounding land to Kay, then they would have nothing to do with the wealth. Dalton was the same. So they always avoided the question of Kay's request to buy the land. They said that it didn't matter whether Kay bought it or not, as long as Kay wanted to live there, he could lie there forever. Talking about money would hurt feelings. To put it bluntly, they just wanted to keep the property rights, because according to British law, the land below 800 meters belongs to the landowner, and Kay's mausoleum happened to be within this range. In other words, from a legal point of view, these wealth belonged to the royal family, because the ownership of the manor was in the hands of the royal family. To put it bluntly, if the royal family really intended to take the wealth, Kay would not be able to win the lawsuit, because according to the current British law, Kay had no evidence to prove that the wealth belonged to him, because he didn't even have a land certificate. The British still hoped to use softer means. Among them, land ownership is one of the ways. For example, if Kay died one day, the wealth would naturally belong to the British royal family. So, these two guys tricked Kay into going to the battlefield, and who knows what they were thinking secretly. As for using force, let's not talk about Kay's strength. Can the British force him to bow his head? Even if they could capture Kay, they still couldn't enter the mausoleum. Otherwise, they would have emptied the mausoleum 20 years ago. Why would they wait until now? As for why they succeeded this time, it was because of Diana, a fierce person. If it weren't for this Amazon warrior, Steve and his team wouldn't be able to enter the mausoleum. But similar to Kay's problem, the British couldn't control Diana, and the British were not sure whether Diana would help them to rob Kay's property. Anyway, according to analysis, the probability of Diana agreeing was very small. In fact, when Kay and his team arrived in London, the royal family and Dalton sent people to enter the mausoleum again in secret. As a result, they sadly found that even with Catherine's detailed report, they were still annihilated. They suspected that Kay had done something to the mausoleum during the week he stayed in the mausoleum after waking up. Well, their suspicion was correct. Kay did do something. The mausoleum has been around for thousands of years. Although many traps and magic are still working, in fact, most of the magic traps have failed. The power of time is always greater than anything else. So Kay spent some time rearranging those things, restoring the defense of the mausoleum to its heyday. Kay did this not because he was afraid that someone would touch the wealth inside, because most of the wealth in the mausoleum had been collected by Kay into the prince's treasury, and he was carrying it with him, so what was there to be afraid of? The reason Kay did this was simple, because this mausoleum might be the last bond between Kay and that era. He naturally did not allow anyone to destroy it. Chapter 167 Awesome Flower Grower. It can be seen here that George V and his men were cunning, and Kay was no worse. They were still fantasizing about the wealth in the mausoleum, but what they didn't know was that Kay carried the wealth with him, which was more convenient than putting it in his pocket. Isn't the king's treasury for this? Of course, Kay's treasure house is still not as exaggerated as Gilgamesh's. Kay has seen Gilgamesh's treasure house, and the wealth in it is the real gold and silver. Kay even suspected that all the wealth in the world at that time was not as much as Gilgamesh. Dalton and his men have been hesitant about the ownership of the land, and at the same time, they have been constantly testing the information of the treasure. Finally, Kay got impatient and directly demonstrated what the king's treasury was, and then Dalton and his men honestly sold the land to Kay. There was no way. The ability shown by Kay made them not want to covet it, and they couldn't even understand this method. I had no choice but to give up. Of course, the British were not good people either. With no hope for those riches, they asked for a lot. They could see that Kay was determined to get the land there. Since Kay wanted it and had money, they would kill him. Kay didn't waste time talking to them. He gave them as much as they asked. And Dalton was not polite either. He asked for £10 million. The pre-war ratio, payment in gold. To be honest, Dalton dared to ask so black-heartedly because he saw that Kai didn't understand the market. Before the war, 1 ounce of gold was exchanged for £3, 17 shillings and 10.5 pence. The pound was on the gold standard, and you could exchange pounds for gold. But the problem is that it is wartime now, and the British government has overissued, referring to printing more banknotes, resulting in a sharp depreciation of the pound and a sharp appreciation of gold. According to the current black market price, 1 ounce of gold can be exchanged for almost £100. And there is no market for it, because during the war, the UK implemented special laws, and now all banks have stopped exchanging gold. So even though £10 million may not seem like much, it was definitely a huge sum of money at the time. To give an intuitive example, the purchasing power of £1 at that time was equivalent to 1,000 yuan now. Just imagine how much money this is. So Dalton was really evil. But Kay didn't care, because he did a little calculation and found that even according to the pre-war ratio, £10 million was just a small amount. Kay didn't even need to use the treasures in the mausoleum, and his own private money could easily pay for it. When Kay traveled around the world, he also accumulated a lot of wealth, which he originally planned to leave to his descendants. But when Dalton, who was black-hearted, spoke, George V trembled on the side. He was frightened by his advisors and teachers. Although the manor was large and well managed, it only cost tens of thousands of pounds at most. After all, real estate was not easy to sell during the war. But for such a piece of land, Dalton sold it for 10 million. You must know that before the war, the military expenditure of Britain was generally maintained at around 200 million pounds. This earned 1/20th of the military expenditure. Of course, it was more than this amount after the war began. In fact, Britain's military expenditure during the war has been maintained at about 2.5 billion pounds per year, but when Kai opened the king's treasury and poured gold directly on the ground in front of George V and Dalton like pouring water, George V felt that Dalton seemed to have less. George V always thought that their British royal family was relatively rich, but today he really saw what a rich man was. The reception room, which was originally quite large, was suddenly filled with gold. If George V had not been agile, he might have been drowned by gold. Although he felt that he had less, Kai's bold payment method still shocked Dalton speechless. Money is bullshit. When Kai reminded them to sign the contract, the two came back to their senses from the huge amount of gold. Although they were all wealthy people, it was the first time they saw so much gold so directly laid out in front of them. After coming back to their senses, George V did not prepare the transfer contract immediately, but kept promoting the royal family's real estate in London. During World War I, Britain was not having an easy time, and the royal family was not having an easy time either. In order to get the nobles to buy war bonds, the royal family had to set an example and use their own wealth to subsidize the government, and they bought war bonds with blood in their hearts. Now the royal family's funds are also stretched, so George V also hopes to get some financial subsidies. Kai was not very interested in George V's sales promotion, but seeing that this guy was doing well as a licker, he took out several million pounds of gold to buy several castles and some properties in London. Among them was Leeds Castle, which was known as the Queen of Castles and was the best country castle of the royal family. George V was very happy about this, and even when he was happy, he directly canonized Kai as the Grand Duke of the Rhine, which was regarded as restoring Kai's original noble status. Of course, this Grand Duke was just an honorary title. Kai had neither territory nor salary, nor corresponding political status and power. Kai didn't care. If George V really gave him these things, he wouldn't dare to ask for them. After all, the more power you have, the more responsibility you have to bear. Kai is not interested in taking any responsibility for a country he doesn't understand at all. After talking with the King of England, Kai did not return to Leicester's Manor immediately. Instead, he lived in St. James's Palace in London, which is located next to St. James's Park in the centre of London, not far from Buckingham Palace. No matter how indifferent Kai was, George V remained infatuated with him and still admired him very much. He even urged Kai to live near Buckingham Palace so that he could listen to the great deeds of the ancient Knight Kingdom at any time. Kai also stayed because he wanted to understand something. Unlike other royal palaces in the UK, St. James's Palace is built with red bricks and is not magnificent. Only the gatehouse is a little higher. From the shape of the building and the shape of the garden arch, It can be seen that this is a typical building of the Tudor dynasty in the UK. Kai likes this castle very much. It is low-key and not gorgeous, and has a very living atmosphere. He even thought about paying for it. But George V was powerless because the previous asset resale made many people in the royal family extremely dissatisfied and believed that this undermined the dignity of the royal family. So even if George V wanted to sell it again, it would not work. In the end, Kai could only pay a sum of money to rent it here as his temporary residence. Kai lived here these days and began to read various books to enrich himself. Especially about the information of the ancient country in the East, he was seriously planning to go back there. Even Kai had planned that the first step before he went back was to spend a lot of money to buy back the cultural relics looted from China by the British from the British Museum. This can be regarded as a contribution made by him, a wanderer from another world, to China in this time and space. But after reading a lot of information, Kai found speechlessly that China in this time and space did not need his contribution at all. Seeing his predecessors in this time and space so fierce, Kai began to doubt whether he had the need to go back. The key is that he still looks like a ghost. With the current prejudice of the flower-growing family against ghosts, it seems that he will not have a good life if he goes back. After that, a visit by Cortman completely eliminated Kai's idea of going home. According to Cortman, the attitude of the big country in the East towards foreigners has always been not very good, so some honest foreigners can live there. But it is only for honest ordinary people. As for those foreigners with extraordinary powers, don't even think about it. Cortman also told Kai a story to prove it. Around the middle of the 19th century, it was the most rampant period of vampires. Vampires were fighting the church in Europe. At that time, in order to strengthen their strength, vampires also thought about expanding to the east. At the same time, the church also had such an idea, but the church's approach was smarter. They planned to let the vampires take the lead, and then they would go to the flower-growing country to take root under the name of helping the flower-growing family to fight vampires. As a result, the vampires went, and the church followed. Then they all died. They were suppressed by the local government of the flower-growing country at that time. The church sent people to negotiate, but the flower-growing family didn't pay any attention at all. They didn't look down on the church as a civil organization at all. Of course, the church was not happy, so it organized an expeditionary force to let the flower-growing family see the strength of the church. At that time, several countries responded to the call, but the church's expeditionary fleet was destroyed by a group of pirates before it had time to approach the mainland. What's more frustrating is that the feudal government of the flower-growing country at that time didn't know from beginning to end that there was such an expeditionary force to trouble them. Chapter 168 Reincarnation. Why are you so obsessed with that Eastern country? They are very arrogant, even more arrogant than the French. They always think that they are civilized people, and we Westerners are barbarians in their eyes. I remember that after the war started, the cabinet wanted to send people to form an alliance with the Easterners, but they arrogantly refused and were only willing to do business with us. While drinking the black tea brewed by Kai's new butler, old Alfred, Cortman expressed his confusion about Kai's efforts to collect information about the East. The original team for the tomb exploration had been disbanded. Diana and Steve returned to the front line. Before they left, they came to St. James's Palace. Especially Diana, she really hoped that Kai could go with her to fight Ares. Unfortunately, Kai still refused. He had no interest in the war in front of him. Diana was very disappointed, but the boy named Steve seemed relieved. His performance made Kai feel very funny. Although Kai was not very proficient in dating, he could see that Steve liked Diana very much. He also understood why Steve behaved like that. Kai naturally had no intention of intervening between them. After all, for Kai, it was only a few days before he separated from his fiancée. He had not thought about starting a new relationship. Besides, the relationship between the two of them was very interesting to Kai. The relationship between the two of them was a bit like that between junior high school students, very ambiguous, but they didn't know how to continue to develop. It was a bit like a pure first love. But Kai didn't think much of their relationship. Because Diana was a god. Although she was only a demigod, after Kai's stimulation, Diana ignited her divinity. She had now embarked on the path of the gods. She only needed to accumulate and comprehend, and she could naturally become a real god. The biggest difference between the gods and humans was lifespan. Diana could live for thousands or even tens of thousands of years, but what about Steve? Many people say that age is not a problem in the face of love. You just need to listen to this. To Diana, Steve was just a passing guest, a very short one. However, Kai was not a life mentor, so he was naturally not interested in giving the two young people any love guidance. He himself hadn't figured it out yet. Captain Nemo also left. He and Hyde went together. Dr. Hyde was not an adventurous person, but the impact of this time was too great, so he decided to go with Captain Nemo to relax, otherwise he felt that he would have schizophrenia again. Only Mina, Courtman and Catherine stayed. Among them, Catherine was arranged by Dalton to be Kai's life assistant. There should also be the intention of monitoring and spying, but others did this so obviously, which was enough to show goodwill, and Kai did not refuse. He had no secrets that could not be known by others. Kai took the black tea from Catherine. Thank you. In the face of Kai's thanks, Catherine showed a very charming smile. Seeing Catherine smile, even an old man like Courtman, who had already calmed down, felt his heartbeat speed up. Catherine is in much better condition now. How did you do it? Courtman had seen the power of Catherine's charm when she was fully activated, and even an old man like him would be addicted to it. In comparison, Catherine is much better now. Although she is still wearing a nun's uniform, she is not as tight as before. At least she shows her hands and neck. If she dared to show a little more skin in the past, the men on the street would surely riot. That is just an abnormal state caused by the awakening of the blood of the three-phase goddess. It is not difficult to suppress it. In the future, when she can control the power in her blood well, she can do whatever she wants. Kai threw a book, The Complete History of the Flower Planting Family, on the table and said, "This book is written by a British historian and is still a bestseller in London." However, after Kai flipped through it, he sneered. The whole book is full of inferiority and superiority to the flower planting family. The content is even more nonsense. Almost all the history of the flower planting family before the Qin dynasty is criticized as the flower planting family's own imagination. At the same time, the history of the flower planting family is criticized, and it seems that the flower planting family is a concentration of backward humans. Anyway, there are all kinds of dissatisfaction and contempt. Kai frowned when he saw it. Originally, Courtman wanted to continue the initial topic and have a good chat with Kai about the three-phase goddess, but when he saw Kai's actions, he planned to ask what was wrong. As a result, Catherine asked first. "My Lord Duke, this book is not to your liking." Catherine gently picked up the book and put it away. Ever since Kai helped her solve the problem that bothered her the most, she has always felt grateful to Kai. No one likes to be wrapped up like a dumpling. In addition, Kai has knowledge that can help Catherine improve, so Catherine is willing to stay with Kai. The whole book is nonsense. How did this author wear the hat of a historian? Are all historians in London at this level? Kai doesn't like this book with a strong populist flavor. There is nothing valuable at all. It is purely for fooling fools. Courtman spoke at this time. "I know this author. He is not a historian at all. He is just a best-selling author. His views are not worth mentioning in the history community." "You have no need to be angry." Kai would not be really angry. There are many idiots who only cater to the public's anger and populist ideas to make money, even in the 21st century. By the way, what did you just say? Kai was disgusted by the content of the book before, and did not hear Courtman's question for a while. "Oh, I mean, why are you so obsessed with the Eastern countries?" Courtman has always been curious about this question. He has come to Kai several times, and every time they will talk about this issue. Kai did not answer Courtman's question immediately, but leaned back on the chair. After a long while, Kai slowly said, "Do you believe in past lives? Are you talking about the Hinduism and Buddhism? How do you say that word, reincarnation?" India is a British colony, so some knowledge about India is still popular in the UK, but almost most British people do not know much about Indian culture. They are at a level of understanding. It is good that Courtman can talk about reincarnation. I don't really believe it. I believe in God. Although Courtman has faith, he believes in doctrines and doesn't believe in God. He is a staunch atheist, at least before he met Kai. Don't think that all atheists have no faith. They just don't believe in gods, but they are not opposed to religion. They believe in religion as a philosophy. I believe that I was a flower-growing family in my previous life. I'm sure, Kai said seriously. He didn't lie. He was indeed a flower-growing family in his previous life, and he was also a glorious people's policeman. Courtman shrugged at Kai's point of view. There was no way to talk about this kind of thing. Cortman had seen someone claiming to be God. In comparison, Kai's statement was not excessive. I still have the same view. The Eastern countries are not friendly to people like you. They will not have a second attitude except to kill them all. You should be more cautious. Well, I will. Kai knew that what Cortman said was right. Catherine had taken a lot of information from the intelligence department to prove this. He didn't want to continue discussing this with Cortman, so he changed the topic. Where are we going today? If Kai had time, he would go around London with Cortman and the others. Cortman came today for this purpose. Chapter 169, Battle and Demons. Kay was taken by Cortman to visit a Belgian detective named Hercule Poirot. Poirot was a retired Belgian police officer, but because he spoke French, he was often mistaken for a Frenchman. Before the war began, he came to England to settle down and lived in 56B Whitehaven House, Sandhurst Square, London. He is now a famous detective in London. While Kay was traveling in London with Cortman, the Germans finally began to make some moves. At 5 p.m. on October 22, 1916, near Reims, France, when the Germans' routine heavy artillery bombardment stopped roaring, there was silence all around, only gusts of breeze blew through the positions. Soldiers climbed up from the trenches and stretched their bodies. They saw clouds of fog coming from the north with a wind. They were amazed and thought they saw a mysterious European landscape, but they didn't know that an unprecedented death god was waving aside at them. At 7 p.m. that day, the French command lost contact with the front line. Neither the radio nor the wire telephone could be connected. At that time, the command thought that the radio and the wire telephone had malfunctioned, so the command decided to use the safest communication method at the time to contact the front line, directly dispatching messengers. At the beginning of World War I, radio equipment was only popularized at the army level, and the division level did not have its own communication equipment, so radio failures caused the troops to lose contact. It was a very frequent occurrence. At that time, the most common communication method for the French army was wire telephones, but wire telephones also had their own disadvantages, that is, the lines were easily disconnected for various reasons. Therefore, the most reliable communication method at that time was to use messengers to communicate. But at 9 o'clock that night, all the messengers sent did not come back. At this time, the French command finally reacted and there was a problem on the front line. So the command immediately mobilized the reserve. Unfortunately, it was too late. The German army had broken through the front line positions and reached the city of Reims. At about 12 o'clock that night, Reims was declared lost. The French army retreated nearly 60 kilometers before relying on a large number of reinforcements to resist the German attack. According to the French statistics during the day of the second day, the French army lost a total of 9 infantry regiments, a total of 22,500 people, including more than hundreds of artillery pieces and thousands of mortars, as well as countless weapons and equipment. More than 3 infantry regiments lost contact before the start of the war and never appeared on the battlefield again. The French command was confused about how these 3 infantry regiments disappeared. According to the confessions of the French troops in the adjacent positions, they did not hear the sound of fighting, no gunshots, and no artillery. The German army suddenly launched an attack on them from the positions where the 3 infantry regiments were located without any signs. In order to find out what happened in the middle, the French intelligence department began to work at full capacity, and Paris once again strengthened the army in Reims. But before we figured out what happened here, the German army launched an attack in the Aisne River area the next day. There was also heavy fog, and the front-line troops suddenly lost contact. The German army suddenly appeared in the middle of the French position silently. Subsequently, the German army formed a Marne River salient with a front of 80 kilometers and a depth of 60 kilometers in the French front. Then, the German High Command planned to concentrate the forces of 3 armies in the Marne River area, the 7th, 1st, and 3rd Armies, a total of 48 divisions, 6,353 artillery pieces, and about 400 aircraft, break through the Allied defense line from Fort Thierry and the Aisne River, and then develop an attack on Paris. The French 6th, 5th, and 4th Armies, a total of 36 divisions and 3,080 artillery pieces, organized defense in depth and echelon configuration, and formed a confrontation with the German army, and the two sides were deadlocked. However, the French command had a negative attitude towards this defense because they were afraid that the situation that happened twice before would happen again. They still couldn't be sure how the German army managed to break through their front position silently. The British government was also very frightened. In order to stabilize France and prevent the German army from entering Paris, they could only increase the troops on the French front. Britain temporarily mobilized 4 British divisions to reinforce the Marne River front, and in order to make up for the huge losses of the French army, Britain could only recruit troops from the country again. The changes on the front also affected London. At least from Kai's perspective, London has become much more depressed. Even if you see pedestrians on the street, they are all in a hurry. In addition, it is deep winter and the weather is cold, which makes the whole of London feel like the sun is setting. The front is not good. The Germans have taken the initiative now. France is preparing to move the capital again. During the First Battle of the Marne, the French government moved to Porto. Courtman seems to have gotten used to chatting with Kai whenever he is free these days. In fact, Courtman likes to come to Kai not only because Courtman is curious about Kai, but also because the British government is also fueling the flames. They hope that Courtman can influence Kai subtly, and Courtman did not refuse. Kai learned a lot of things that happened on the front line from Courtman's mouth. Kai looked at the frontline battle briefing that Courtman got from somewhere, but he was very confused. He learned the history of World War I when he was in school. Although many details were unclear, he still knew about the 2 battles of the Marne. If my memory serves me right, the First Battle of the Marne took place in September 1914, which is the right time for this. The Second Battle of the Marne took place in July 1918, but it is only the end of October 1916 now. This Battle of the Marne actually took place 2 years earlier. And judging from the battlefield situation, the Allies are not doing well. You know, in the last time and space, the Allies prepared a counterattack plan when they organized their defense, but according to the news brought by Courtman, the main focus of the Allies is still on blocking the German army. They are even pessimistic about whether they can defend Paris, let alone counterattack. Judging from the current situation, Germany must have used some extraordinary means. Just when Kai was about to discuss this issue with Courtman, Catherine knocked on the door and came in. "My lord, Reverend Dalton is visiting." Kai's daily routine is to read books at home or visit friends with Courtman. This old man has many friends. Then there was bragging with Courtman at home. For men, no matter how old they were, it was in their bones to point out the way forward and make a fuss. Everyone liked to make themselves look like a national leader. Undoubtedly, Courtman and Kay both had such a hobby. They even made a deduction of the war situation themselves. Of course, this deduction was extremely unprofessional and was completely based on subjective assumptions. But neither of them cared. It was just bragging. Why care so much? Kay was very comfortable in such days. Sometimes George V would join in, but Reverend Dalton had never seen him again after the first meeting. However, Kay could probably guess that what this guy wanted to say was nothing more than to let him join their camp. Let him in. Kay did not turn him away. He was shortchanged. Kay was still aware of the royal family and the British government's open and covert preferential treatment for him during this period of time. This face must be given. Dalton soon pushed the door in. But to Kay's surprise, Dalton did not persuade Kay right away, but handed Kay a stack of photos. Although Kay was a little confused, he still took the photo. When he saw the content of the photo, Kay's face changed immediately. Demon. Although the photo was a little blurry, Kay still saw what was in the photo. "Where did you take this kind of thing?" The content of the photo was very shocking and bloody. Countless human bodies were dismembered, the blood was drained, and piled up in a huge pit. Some humanoid creatures were reveling in such an environment. Most of them were pictures of sacrifices. Although Kai didn't recognize many of these sacrificial rituals, the core things were not much different from what Kai had seen before. Demons, a very ancient creature. But unlike most people's imagination of demons now, demons have nothing to do with things like God and angels, and their birth has nothing to do with humans. In Kai's concept, they are more like alien creatures. Just like the ice giants Kai met in Asgard, they came from other spaces, but because of some special coincidence, the demon world and the Earth have a very subtle connection. Demons can run to the Earth through something like a space channel. Kai had fought against this kind of creatures together with the tough guys of Asgard, so he knew a few things. These things feed on human flesh and soul. It can even be said that human flesh and soul have extraordinary temptation to them. These things can make these demons evolve, so in order to get these things, the demons will find ways to come to the Earth. However, Because there is a group of people who have been fighting against them and preventing them from entering the earth, as guardians generally rarely fight against demons, because the probability of their appearance is very low, and Kai was lucky to have encountered them once. But unexpectedly, after thousands of years, these demons actually appeared again, and judging from the photos, their number is still not small. Facing Kai's question, Dalton said gloomily, "Battlefield. Our spies took photos from the battlefield in Lance, but due to some changes, these photos have not been received until now. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels." Chapter 170, I was stuck. I only managed to write 400 words in one night. I was so busy today. It's New Year's Day soon, and the company needs to finish the business before the New Year's Day holiday. When I got home and looked at the computer, my mind was blank. I wrote 400 words overnight. I have no choice but to revise it today. I'm very sorry. Chapter 171, Pulling Down the Water and the Butler. Demons, should be. I remember that they can't appear on Earth on a large scale. Kai remembered that King Bully of Asgard once said that a group of wizards had been committed to strangling this creature that could directly threaten the continuation of the human race. And from the intelligence Kai got later, this group of wizards seemed to have used some other means to isolate the demons from entering the Earth. Before Kai returned to Great Britain, they had succeeded. For example, Catherine's witch weaving can only summon demons for a short time to help her attack the enemy. Demons can't come to the world at all. Pastor Dalton was silent for a while before saying, "Although I don't know what demons are in your time, in modern times, demons do have a way to appear in the world." "What method?" Kai asked. He really didn't understand much. There were very few demon-related things in the spells he had learned. Kai did know a little about Catherine's way, but in Kai's opinion, it was just borrowing the power of demons for a short time, not summoning demons. Sacrifice. A large-scale living sacrifice held by demon believers. Dalton pointed to the photo. Kai looked over in surprise, and then asked in disbelief, "You mean, the appearance of these demons was caused by the Germans' own sacrifices to bring them to Earth? Don't they know that demons feed on humans? How can prey summon predators to eat themselves?" About 5 days later, Kai, Catherine, Courtman and his new butler, old Alfred, boarded the most advanced submarine in the world today, the Nautilus, and set off from London to Egypt. On the Nautilus, Kai looked at a pile of information provided by Dalton, but he kept complaining about his own indecision in his heart. He did not intend to get involved in the war between the British and Germans at first, but when he knew that the Germans actually planned to use those dark creatures to win the war, Kai could not help but take action. There are some things that Kai can really ignore. For example, the conflict of interests between the Germans and the British. Although the war between them will harm many people, it is still a matter of human beings and an internal contradiction among the people. In Kai's view, there is no question of who is just and who is evil between the Allies and the Central Powers, and both sides are not good people. So Kai didn't care who he helped or not. But it was different when monsters like vampires and demons joined in. That was an enemy-enemy conflict. Kai couldn't tolerate those monsters hurting humans. That was his natural position. But despite this, Kai still felt that the British were cunning. When they knew that Kai was dissatisfied with the Germans and demons mixing together, they collected a lot of evidence about the Germans and those dark creatures mixing together in a very short time, especially the intelligence about those dark creatures harming ordinary people, and they put out a lot of information. This deeply stimulated Kai, and with Dalton and George V's indignant indignation, Kai's anger was really stirred, and Kai agreed to help them without paying attention. Of course, Kai also knew that this was their method, but Kai didn't care. There must be a bottom line in life, and the Germans' actions obviously exceeded the bottom line, so Kai didn't mind being used by the British. So, there is really a reason why the Germans like to be treated as villains. Thinking of this, Kai had to complain. In Kai's previous life, any TV series about World War I and World War II that mentioned Germany would definitely be the villain. Kai once complained about this. Because in Kai's opinion, World War II is fine, Germany has committed many crimes, and it is right to be the villain. But World War I was a bit unfair. As mentioned above, the Allies and the Central Powers are not good people. No one should say anything about anyone. It's just that the Germans lost, so they were regarded as villains. But now, the Germans are really asking for their own death. "Duke, do you want afternoon tea?" Just when Kai was thinking about it, Kai's butler knocked on the door and came in. "Is it afternoon now?" Kai looked up at his butler, old Alfred, and said puzzledly. They are now at the bottom of the sea, so Kai's sense of time is a little confused. "Yes, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon now," old Alfred replied respectfully. This old butler has always been in the same posture since Kai first met him, wearing a dark swallowtail butler suit, a snow-white shirt and gloves, with elegant manners, rigorous and capable. A typical old-school British court style, with etiquette, details and vanity. The professional concept and scope of duties of the butler are strictly regulated according to court etiquette. A washed snow-white shirt, a black or white vest, a black bow tie, a black tailcoat, straight black trousers and shiny black leather shoes, yes, and a neat hair and a straight body. Almost everyone who has seen him will admit that this butler is a gentleman among gentlemen. More gentleman than a gentleman, more noble than a noble. This sentence has always been Alfred's motto. Really, Kai didn't have any special feelings about afternoon tea, but he didn't refuse. By the way, how long will it take us to Egypt? Although the environment of the Nautilus was not bad, Kai still felt a little bit overwhelmed after sailing for more than half a month. Old Alfred's full name is Alfred Pennyworth. He was introduced to Kai by George V. The old man's family has served the British royal family for generations. Counting Alfred, the family has been the royal butler for 5 generations. Originally, Alfred was supposed to stay as the royal butler until retirement, and then let his son take over. But 2 years ago, his son joined the army. This is nothing. The Pennyworth family has a tradition of joining the army. Their family even believes that the training of the army can make them better qualified for the job of butler. But unfortunately, his son died in France. It was also because of this blow that made old Alfred depressed for a long time. During this period, old Alfred thought that his condition was not suitable for serving the King of England, so he retired early. Until recently, he accepted the King of England's commission and came out again to serve as Kai's butler. I asked First Mate Yoshi, the Nautilus will arrive in Alexandria at 9 o'clock in the evening on the 19th. After that, we will take the train directly to Cairo. About 6 o'clock in the afternoon on the 3rd day after arriving in Alexandria, we will stay at the Cairo Grand Hotel. Some people wondered why Kai went to Egypt and brought a butler with him. The reason is simple, because according to the intelligence of MI6, the Germans have made a big move in Egypt. It is said that they want to use an artifact of ancient Egypt to revive an ancient army. The person in charge of this operation was a wizard who cooperated with the Germans. British intelligence officers also tried to stop it, but all the personnel sent disappeared without exception. Intelligence showed that this wizard had extremely powerful supernatural powers, so this matter was assigned to the Templar Church led by Dalton. Except for Mina, because the vampire queen did not like the environment of Egypt. Dalton, who received the incident report, attached great importance to it, so he asked Kai to take the former tomb exploration team to deal with it. As for why he brought old Alfred, the reason is very simple, because Alfred is not just a simple butler. As a family that has served the British royal family for 5 generations, the people of the Pennyworth family are no longer ordinary butlers. In addition to their duties as butlers, they are also proficient in but not limited to intelligence collection and collation, guarding, hand-to-hand combat, the use and maintenance of various firearms, driving various means of transportation, etc. It can be said that any butler from the Pennyworth family can easily be a MI6 agent. Such a great man, what reason does Kai have not to bring him? Chapter 172 Book of the Dead. The Nautilus is a unique submarine in the world. It is a blade-shaped submarine with a total length of 135 meters and a width of 13 meters. It sails in the sea like a sharp blade that cuts through the sea, so the crew privately calls their ship the Sword of Poseidon. The maximum speed can reach 50 nautical miles per hour. This speed is simply a myth. You should know that even the best British surface ships have a speed of about 50 nautical miles, 28 knots. And the Nautilus is a submarine. At the same time, the power of the Nautilus is also epic-making. It is completely powered by electricity. What's more amazing is that the power of the Nautilus is completely extracted from seawater. The ship extracts sodium from lead, mixes sodium with mercury, and forms an alloy that replaces the zinc element in the Bunsen battery unit. It is then converted into electricity and stored in the battery. In short, the ship is full of black technology, And some things even amaze even Kai, who has experienced the 21st century. The interior of the ship is very spacious and comfortable, and there are even museums and libraries. In addition to being a little noisy and boring, it is more comfortable here than an ordinary star-rated hotel. Kay's journey on the Nautilus was barely pleasant. If you don't count the terrible food on the ship. Captain Nemo and most of the sailors are from the Indian subcontinent. In short, they are all Indians. Can you imagine the whole ship is filled with the smell of curry? That's the case on the Nautilus. These sailors are all good. Although they are Indians, each of them is polite and full of humanistic atmosphere. Each of them even speaks more than 2 foreign languages. Kay also likes them, but he can't agree with their eating habits. They even refuse to use tableware. On the contrary, Catherine and Cortman and their group of British people like the food on the Nautilus very much. After about a month of sailing, Kay finally set foot on land. Under Alfred's arrangement, everyone quickly took the train to Cairo. When Kay set foot on Egypt, a familiar yet unfamiliar land, he felt that the atmosphere here was not very good. The Egyptians did not welcome the British, and were even very hostile. This feeling was particularly strong after leaving Alexandria. In fact, Britain did not have much control over Egypt. Britain only occupied Egypt to ensure the Suez Canal. In November 1914, the Ottoman Empire joined the war. Egypt stood firmly with the central government. Egypt was nominally a province of the Ottoman Empire at that time, so Britain unilaterally declared its protectorate over Egypt. It overthrew the government at that time and supported a new government. The head of the new government was forced to declare himself the Sultan of Egypt, independent of the Ottomans. Such a government naturally could not get the support of the Egyptians, so the new government had no authority in Egypt. Outside Cairo, the government's orders were like waste paper. At this time, Britain had no ability to change this situation. After all, their main focus was in Europe. The British only had to ensure control of the Suez Canal. As for the actual disintegration of Egypt, it was not considered by them. When the group walked out of Cairo railway station, they could clearly see the malice of the Egyptians around them. Kai naturally didn't feel anything about this malice, because he was not British. He just felt that things had changed. Egypt used to be one of the most developed regions in the world. The pharaoh ruled the whole of North Africa and Egypt. But now, the once magnificent buildings are nowhere to be found. The original self-confidence and pride have disappeared from the faces of the Egyptians. Instead, they are replaced by dilapidated, low and dirty cities. People's faces only show numbness and hatred. After entering the hotel, an officer came up to talk to him. He should be the contact person of the British government here. These things were originally the responsibility of Catherine and Cortman, but when Kai saw the appearance of this officer clearly, he couldn't help but say to the old Alfred who was holding the salute beside him, "Is it my illusion? Why do I always feel that this child looks like you? This officer is very young, he looks only in his 20s, but he has the rank of captain." "No, Duke, that's not your illusion. He is my grandson, little Alfred." Kai looked at old Alfred in surprise. "Really?" "Yes," old Alfred said with a little reserve. "He's only 20 years old then. Your son." "Sorry, I didn't mean to mention that." Kai originally wanted to say that Alfred's son died 2 years ago, so why did he let his grandson, who was only 20 years old, join the army? Kai knew that Alfred's son was only 36 years old when he died in the war, and his grandson was not yet an adult at that time. "No. You don't have to apologize, I understand what you mean. But I must say that as a man of the Pennyworth family, it is their responsibility to join the army, especially in times of war, and it is even more impossible for a man of the Pennyworth family to escape responsibility. It has been more than 2 years since his son died, and during this period, Alfred has adjusted himself. Although Kai is not British, this does not affect Kai's appreciation of Alfred. Patriots will be respected wherever they are. Soon Catherine and Cortman finished negotiating with the young man. After completing the work, the young man walked to his grandfather with a happy face and took the salute from Alfred's hand. "My Lord Duke, this is my grandson, Alfred." This is the bad thing about foreigners. They like to give their offspring the same name as their own or their elders, and they are not afraid of confusion. For example, the grandson of old Alfred should be called Alfred II or Alfred Jr. Alfred, this is the Duke of Brittany. "Hello, Your Excellency the Duke." Little Alfred did not let the name of the Pennyworth family be damaged. Although he was wearing a military uniform, his etiquette was impeccable. "Hello, can I call you Alfred?" Kai is Chinese at heart, and it is a bit awkward for the grandfather and grandson to use the same name, so he simply used the abbreviation. Of course, it is a bit rude to call someone by their abbreviation when you meet for the first time. Little Alfred obviously did not meet such a person. You can tell the environment he grew up in by looking at old Alfred. However, with good education and cultivation, he did not show any strange emotions, but nodded and agreed very naturally. Of course, it's my honor, Your Excellency the Duke. Then Alfred took everyone to the room that had been reserved long ago. After settling in, a group of people gathered in Kai's room and began to understand the current situation of the mission. Before you arrive, we finally figured out who led the German team this time, Grigory Yefimovich Rasputin. A priest of the Russian Empire, a favorite of the Tsar and the Empress. The person who reported to Kai and the others was a British intelligence officer, brought in by Afu. Wait, are you talking about that evil monk who is half human and half demon? Dr. Hyde, who had always been very quiet, asked very gossipy. You can search Baidu for the deeds of this Grigory Yefimovich Rasputin. He is a very powerful person. I won't go into details. Anyway, he was involved in all kinds of harem and government affairs. In history, Gregory was killed in October 1916. I changed it here, although it is wartime now, some things will not fade away because of war, especially gossip. It has spread all over Russia, and many London newspapers have also published it. London newspapers like to publish such news during wartime to ease people's tension. So Gregory's name is still very famous in London. Yes, that's him, isn't he Russian? How could he be involved with the Germans? A favorite of the Tsar actually involved with the Germans and even fled to Egypt, which is indeed worrying. He has already defected. His situation in Russia is not good. Many people want to kill him. In fact, before he defected to Germany, he had suffered countless assassinations. The most recent assassination was conspired by Prince Yusupov, Grand Duke Dmitry, Senator Purishkevich and others. So he defected. The intelligence officer shrugged and curled his lips a little helplessly. Gregory is undoubtedly a scandal of the Russians. If it were normal times, the British would be happy to see the Russians lose face, but the problem is that they are allies now, and what's more unfortunate is that this Gregory has begun to cause trouble for Britain. Well, this is the Russian. Courtman also shrugged. Few British people like Russians, especially in the current situation. In the war, although the Russians are not pig teammates, their role is quite limited. The Russians' record is really not that good. Kai didn't know much about Gregory. He looked at Old Fu. The name is too long, so I'll just simplify it. As a butler, Old Fu never let Kai down. Soon Old Fu told Kai some of Gregory's deeds. Kai was stunned. He came to Egypt this time to find the legendary Book of the Dead. Huh? What did you just say? Kai, who was originally listening to gossip, suddenly heard a familiar name. Book of the Dead. The intelligence officer was a little confused. He didn't know Kai's identity. In fact, there were no more than 10 people in the whole of Britain who knew Kai's true identity. He only knew that the identity of the Duke of Brittany was very noble and mysterious, and he was asked by his superiors to cooperate unconditionally with the Duke. But Courtman and Catherine understood that Kai must know something. In fact, sometimes they were also very curious, why an ancient English native would know so much about myths outside of England. At least from their chat with Kai, they learned that Kai knew about Olympus, Sumer and ancient Egyptian mythology. Do you know the thing? Catherine asked curiously. Well, that book, how should I put it? Well, let's put it this way, it's better for living people not to touch that book. It's very weird. Kai didn't say anything specific. According to the usual human nature, if Kai explained the function of the book in detail, there might be some idiots who like to die and run to get the book to die. If Gregory with a big bird really wants that book, then the information you got before is very likely to be correct. The British had previously received intelligence that the Germans planned to revive an ancient army. A group of people looked at each other, and they were a little skeptical about Kai's words. However, the tomb exploration team believed it a little, because they had an example of the resurrection of the dead in front of them. Seeing Catherine and the others looking at him, Kai knew what they were thinking. Don't look at me, I'm a special case. The things resurrected by the Book of the Dead are not real living people. Okay, let's get on with the business. Courtman knew that Kai's identity could not be revealed casually, so he quickly changed the subject. Oh. Okay, the intelligence officer quickly gathered his thoughts and continued to explain the intelligence. As an intelligence officer, he naturally knew what to know and what to pretend had not happened. We have learned that Gregory hired an American to help them find the Book of the Dead. We originally planned to continue investigating along this line, but we lost too many people when investigating Gregory, so we couldn't continue to follow this line. But we learned that just half a month ago, a group of Americans hired a group of locals to go south to the depths of the desert. The British intelligence department is indeed very powerful, but this is Egypt. The environment here is naturally unfriendly to the British, and there are too many people lost. Without enough helpers and no manpower, even if these British are 007, they can only be a good cook without rice. They no longer have the ability to collect intelligence outside Cairo. By the way, we have also collected information that another group of people seem to have set their sights on the Book of the Dead. Who are these people? French, Courtman asked. No, the leader is British, a brother and sister. The brother is named Jonathan, and the sister is an archaeologist named Evelyn. They found an American in prison to be their guide, British. Courtman frowned and looked at Catherine. Since the intelligence officer said so, it means that they are not from the intelligence department, so Courtman wondered if they were from the Holy Church. The Holy Church is also underground work from the nature of its work, so it is not surprising to have agents. Catherine shook her head. The people of the Holy Church are mainly active in white-dominated areas such as Britain and Canada, and they are not involved in Egypt. Well, how can you help us? Courtman asked directly. Chapter 173, Love Around the Corner. In fact, the intelligence department can't provide much help in Egypt. Many of their agents have either died at the hands of Gregory or are still tracking down Gregory's whereabouts. What Kai and his team can do now is to wait. Once the intelligence department finds the whereabouts of Gregory or the Book of Kings, they will take action. To put it bluntly, they are here to be thugs. Since everything is fine for the time being, they naturally don't need to be so nervous, so after the meeting, everyone went to rest. The next day, everything was still fine, and the group could move freely. Afu was left behind to take them to visit the exotic customs of Egypt. But when they just walked from the room to the hotel lobby, they made an unexpected discovery. At that time, under the leadership of Afu, they were going to relax in the bar next to the hotel. There was an authentic belly dance performance there, which was difficult to see in conservative London. Except for Catherine, other men were very happy to visit and learn, including Kai. But as soon as they walked to the hotel lobby, they saw a group of people entering the hotel, and they were noisy. This is the British territory. The British are generally more reserved and will not make a big noise in public. So this group of people immediately attracted the attention of most people. Don't you believe in old stories? A tall man with American English said loudly behind a woman. The woman walking in front said with a wrong and anxious look on her face, but we met a mummy that can walk and talk, 3,000 years old, which makes me have to believe it. Don't think about it, we must pack up and leave immediately. No, we won't leave, we must leave. No. We have the responsibility to stop him. The woman seemed very angry. But the man seemed even angrier. We? I didn't read that book. Did I tell you not to touch that book? Yes, it's me. It's all my fault, so I have the responsibility to stop him. As these people were talking, they came to the front desk. The man immediately asked the front desk to check them out, but the woman asked the front desk not to listen to him. While they were arguing, Kai's attention shifted to the three men behind them. One of the men was not in a good condition. He had bandages on his eyes and was supported to sit on the sofa in the hall. What was even more terrifying was that the man's tongue had been pulled out. When he spoke, he not only spoke unclearly, but also drooled constantly. I think, we seem to have found our target, Kai said a little uncertainly. What? Afu turned his head and said in surprise. Didn't you say that a group of Americans hired a group of locals to go find the Book of the Dead? If I'm not mistaken, those three people should be the Americans we are looking for. Kai pointed at the three men and said. A group of people looked at Kai in surprise. How could it be such a coincidence? Before they could ask what was going on, a man and a woman over there started arguing again. How can we stop that guy? Didn't you say that ordinary weapons can't kill them at all? The man shouted angrily. Then let's find extraordinary weapons. The woman was not to be outdone. Listen to me, okay? We can't just sit there and watch. Once that monster is resurrected, his curse will bring disaster to the world. The man was so angry that he laughed at the woman's ignorance. Oh? What does that have to do with me? The woman was suppressed by the man's sudden outburst, and she dodged to the side. This is everyone's business, but the man still walked over aggressively. Evelyn. You saved me, I am grateful. But I only promised to wait for you and bring you back. I have done my job and fulfilled the contract. There is nothing more to say, ahem." Just when the two were arguing excitedly, a cough interrupted. "I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I still have to say that it's not very gentlemanly for you to do this, sir." The two turned their heads to the side and found a handsome and tall young man smiling at them. The man was wearing a very sophisticated light-colored suit with a noble badge on his cuffs and collar. The man was obviously very unhappy with such an uninvited person, and shouted rudely, "Get out. You have nothing to do here. Excuse me, are you Miss Evelyn Kernahan?" But the man didn't care about what the man said at all, just looked at the woman and asked very gentlemanly, "Hey, you?" The man was already annoyed enough, and now there was another inexplicable man making trouble, so the man who could no longer suppress his anger was going to push the troublemaker away. But before his hand touched the person, he was grabbed from the side, twisted his hand behind his back, and his body was pressed on the front. "Ask. You, who are you? What do you want to do?" The sudden change scared the woman, and she immediately hugged her chest and moved to the side. "My name is Kai Brittany. We have no ill intentions, we just want to find you to understand the situation." The person who came was Kai, and the person who controlled the man was Alfu. The people who came to the hotel with the man saw what happened here and immediately drew their guns to support them. As a result, they had just drawn their guns when they were first hit on the head by Cortman and Captain Nemo. "Don't get excited, young man. Relax a little, we just have something to ask you." Evelyn and her group, including Evelyn's brother Jonathan who came back later, were invited to Kai's room. Cortman did not do anything to them, but disarmed them. After that, after Alfu showed his ID, Evelyn could only cooperate honestly. This was a British settlement area, and there was a military camp next to the hotel. Even if they were brave enough, they would not dare to attack. "So, our expedition is related to the current war." Jonathan was confused. He was just a playboy who liked to show off his ability. He was ignorant and timid. Otherwise, he would not have run to Egypt to hide during the war. Unexpectedly, they were still involved in the war while hiding in Africa. "No, it's more serious than that," Kai said a little gloatingly on the side. "First of all, your 3 American friends have been cursed. Although I don't know much about the Egyptian curse, it looks like they are lucky to survive tomorrow." When Jonathan heard this, although his face was a little panicked and sad, he was not panicked at all, because they had no friendship with these 3 Americans, so they died. "Secondly, you, Ms. Evelyn, unfortunately, are also being targeted. Although it's not a curse, I don't think the ending will be much better." Jonathan was really panicked now. That's his sister, his own sister. Evelyn was also a little panicked, but much better than Jonathan. She forced herself to be calm and said, "What does this have to do with me?" "Maybe. Because you resurrected the mummy, he might like you, just like the Frog Prince." The man who had quarreled with Evelyn in the hall before interrupted with a very humorous remark at this time. "His name is Richard O'Connor, an American, and a former soldier." Resurrected the mummy, Kai heard the key point. He looked at Evelyn and said seriously, "What did you do?" Evelyn felt a huge pressure when Kai looked at her like this. "I just read a passage from the Book of the Dead. Chapter 174 Return of the Mummy." "Okay," Kai curled his lips and said helplessly. "Foreigners just like to die." This woman knew it was the Book of the Dead, but she still read it out. What's worse, she read it next to a mausoleum. "Where is the Book of the Dead?" "It's with Dr. Allen," Evelyn said immediately. "Where is Dr. Allen?" Cortman asked. A group of people looked at each other. They didn't know where Dr. Allen had gone. Evelyn and Dr. Allen came back together before, but they didn't know when. "Okay. You are still looking for treasure like this? It's good enough that you didn't kill yourself," Dr. Hyde also complained rarely. Kai smiled and shook his head. A group of careless people were indeed not suitable for such adventures. Who knows when they will kill themselves? In fact, they are not far from killing themselves. Kai glanced at Afu and motioned him to send someone to find Dr. Allen. Afu had already obtained information about Dr. Allen from the other 3 Americans. Seeing Kai's gesture, he immediately nodded and went out. "You just stay here, and I advise you not to think about running away. I can tell you responsibly that it's useless. It's better to stay here and be safer," Kai warned him while walking to the window. He felt that an unusual force was affecting this land. Sure enough, when Kai opened the window, he found that the sky had become extremely dark. Dark clouds were surging in the sky, Countless thunders were flashing, and the air was shaking. Crack! After a lightning bolt that illuminated the sky, countless hail poured down. The pedestrians on the street could only flee in embarrassment. The 10 plagues have begun, Kai looked at the sky and said with some emotion. The so-called 10 plagues are the curse from Elysius. It is a warning and a curse. Legend has it that when the evildoers violate the laws of the gods and return from the underworld, the 10 plagues will come. They are, scarabs devouring people, the sun being blocked, hailstorms, rain of fire from the sky, rivers turning into blood, locusts, mosquitoes and flies, plagues, resurrection of the dead, and finally the coming of darkness. These 10 disasters will come one by one, and in the end, the whole of Egypt will usher in the end. When the sins are cleansed, the earth will recover. The 10 plagues? The ones in the Bible? Catherine asked curiously. The Bible? Kai was a little speechless. The guys who wrote the Bible really had no originality at all. They even copied this? No, it's a curse in ancient Egypt. When someone resurrects a person who has committed a heinous crime, the whole of Egypt will usher in the end. Evelyn and others listened and lowered their heads silently. They didn't expect things to turn out like this. They just wanted to make a fortune. Let's find the Book of the Dead as soon as possible. There should be a way to solve the problem there. Kai shook his head and didn't dwell on the mistakes these people made. Anyway, killing them couldn't stop the development of things, so it's better to save energy and find the Book of the Dead quickly. If everything is caused by us resurrecting the mummy, then the Book of the Dead can't solve the current problem. We can only use the Golden Book of the Sun. The Book of the Dead resurrects the dead, and the Golden Book of the Sun can make the dead rest in peace. Evelyn suddenly remembered another book in the legend. Do you know where that thing is? Kai asked a little surprised. That thing is the handwriting of God Ra, which records many unique spells of God Ra. He also wanted to see it back then, but God Ra didn't let him. Originally, Kai thought that Anubis leaving the Book of the Dead was unexpected enough, but he didn't expect that the Egyptian gods would leave this thing to humans. I don't know, but I have seen the records that it should be in Hamunata. Although Evelyn was a little confused about other things, she was very good at this aspect. Kai was more concerned about. You even found Hamunata. It's really hard for you. Evelyn and O'Connor smiled embarrassedly when they heard this, as if they were a little embarrassed. Do you think I'm praising you? Come on, that's the city of the dead. It's the resting place of the dead. Why are you disturbing those dead people for no reason? Is it fun? The Egyptian civilization has long been cut off. The current Egypt believes in Islam. If it were in the past, they would have been torn to pieces by the angry Egyptian people. Their behavior is undoubtedly digging up people's ancestral graves. Forget it, tell me where the documents you saw are. I need to know the specific location. There is no time now. The longer the time is delayed, the more people will die. Kai didn't have time to tease them. No. I want to go with you. Evelyn's quirk as an archaeologist was triggered again. She didn't want to miss this kind of thing at all. I want to go too. O'Connor saw Evelyn was going, and for some reason he wanted to go with her. Okay, you two come with me. Catherine will come with me. Hyde and Cortman, you protect these idiots and don't let the mummy kill them. This may delay the resurrection of the mummy. Kai naturally didn't care. In fact, compared with these two people, the 3 Americans are the key, of course, and Dr. Allen. Hey, work. You can't hand me over to a nerd, 2 old men, and an Indian. What's the difference between this and handing us directly to the mummy? One of the Americans named Daniel saw Kai handing the 3 of them to Hyde and the other 4, and immediately shouted in dissatisfaction. Except for Nemo, who looks like he has some force, Cortman, Old Ford, and Hyde don't seem to have any force. When something really happens, the Americans really don't know who will protect whom. Hey, if I were you, I would be polite. They are more terrifying to you than mummies. What about me? Jonathan, who had been playing soy sauce on the side, couldn't help asking. You? Whatever, the mummy shouldn't bother you anyway. So Jonathan planned to go out and have fun after Kai and the others left. A group of Americans stayed in a room with a group of typical British people. It must be said that this was really unfriendly to the Americans. Because in their opinion, these British people were a bit effeminate. They were either drinking tea or reading books. The only one standing still was a butler who looked very old-fashioned. They wanted to have some fun in the bar, but Daniels thought about leaving them alone. As a result, he became obedient after being thrown on the back by the old butler. There was no other way. They could only stay in the room and play cards, and only 2 people could play cards. The man named Burns had no eyes and tongue, and he was playing cards at all. He could only let him have a good rest. In this way, the two played cards until 6 o'clock in the evening, when it was completely dark. This was very abnormal, but the group of people didn't take it seriously, because they had seen even more abnormal things. "Should we wake Burns up for dinner?" Daniel said to his companion. The companion looked at the sky and thought so. So he got up and went to the inner room with Daniels. As soon as they opened the door, they saw a dark shadow standing in front of the bed. They came in and obviously disturbed the dark shadow, so the dark shadow turned around. It was a dried corpse with rotten all over its body. It was the mummy they met before. The two immediately drew their guns and shot, and at this time they didn't care about accidentally hurting their teammates. Their cold revolver bullets were useless to the mummy. The mummy rushed towards them as if nothing had happened. Anyway, the three of them were there, and a spoonful of stew was the best option for the mummy. But the mummy still failed to succeed. Their guns attracted Cortman and others. The moment Cortman and Lao Fu heard the gunshot, they picked up the Winchester 1897 pump-action shotgun at hand. This shotgun uses an external hammer and a 5-round tubular magazine. It is a pump-action shotgun with simple operation and even more powerful at close range. The two old men were much faster than Hyde and Captain Nemo. They rushed to the door in almost the next second and fired several consecutive shotgun shells at the mummy, causing the mummy to fly everywhere without even a chance to stand up. Soon, the two old men fired 3 shotgun shells each, forcing the mummy to the window. The two Americans were quite loyal. They took this opportunity to lift their injured companions from the bed and hide outside the room. Before leaving, they gave the two old men a loud whistle. There was no other reason. These two old men were really awesome. After 3 shotgun shells, Cortman threw a few bullets to Old Fu, and then he continued to shoot to suppress the mummy. Old Fu immediately replenished his bullets, and when Old Fu loaded his bullets, he immediately fired, and it was Cortman's turn to change bullets. The two men were like teammates who had worked together for many years, and their movements were smooth and flowing. During this period, the mummy was beaten so hard that he couldn't even lift his head, and had no chance to fight back. The two Americans really looked up to these two old guys. Chapter 175 Good News and Bad News. Changing bullets is a small matter. What's really amazing is the big hearts of these two people. When the Americans saw the mummy for the first time, they were almost scared to pee their pants. Even if they fought back, they shot at the same time in a swarm, with no rhythm at all. But what about these two old men? So steady. After the two old men had fired a round, Hyde and Nemo came. It's not that they are useless, but they are not experts in playing with guns. Hyde is a pure tank, and Captain Nemo is better at using a knife. After the two came, they were not afraid. They picked up the modified long-handled pistol and the 20-round Lee-Enfield short rifle in their hands and shot at the mummy. The 20-round Lee-Enfield short rifle is a special type of gun, specially used for trench warfare. It has a fast firing rate, and all 20 bullets in 1 minute hit the mummy. Captain Nemo's modified long-handled pistol has a more historical origin. Its shape is classical and gorgeous, but the things inside are very high-tech. It was modified by Captain Nemo himself, and it uses special rifle bullets with a caliber of 12.7 millimeters. This thing should not be called a pistol, but a hand cannon. It is so powerful and has a terrible recoil. Only a tough guy like Captain Nemo dares to hold it with one hand. I don't know if Captain Nemo has any superpowers. His arm strength is really strong, and his hand is not broken. That shot directly blew the mummy into 2 pieces, and a big hole was blown out of the ground under the mummy. Kai likes this gun very much, no matter its appearance or power. It's a pity that this is Captain Nemo's private collection. He made it by himself, and there is only one in the world. He can only wait for Captain Nemo to make another one before Kai's turn. The mummy named Immortan was shot without getting anything. In the end, he had no choice but to turn into dust and disappear in the room. The two Americans were dumbfounded. If the two old men were awesome, then Captain Nemo was a god. It was the first time they saw someone shoot with such power from a pistol. The key point was that Captain Nemo's arm was fine after the shot. Soon, the soldiers next to the hotel were alarmed. When Alfu arrived with a group of soldiers, there was nothing left except the messy room. Faced with this situation, Old Fu readily gave the hotel enough compensation and asked the hotel to change a room for them. This time, Old Fu planned to let the 3 Americans sleep in the living room and not let them out of sight. When Kai came back, He found that the hotel was surrounded by sentries and guards. Kai came back this time and brought two people, an old man and a middle-aged man dressed in a black robe. The old man was fine, but the most important thing was that this middle-aged man didn't look like a good person at first glance. He had tattoos on his face and a fierce face. The soldiers naturally couldn't let such obvious extremists enter the hotel. In the end, it was Alfu's arrival that let them in. What's going on? Kai was naturally curious about why the room was changed. Then Lao Fu told Kai about the mummy's arrival. Before Kai had time to comment on this matter, the soldiers reported that they had caught a sneaky guy. O'Connor jumped up immediately when he saw this guy. "Benny. You bastard, you are still alive." O'Connor and Benny should be considered a pair of enemies. The two used to be best friends, but later they fell out. It is said that it was because Benny betrayed him. But Benny did not admit it, and did not think that he was O'Connor's friend. He said that O'Connor only bullied him. Benny is a loco. Although his character is worrying, he has an extraordinary talent for languages. Basically, he can speak a few words in any language. This guy can really speak more than 8 languages, including Chinese. Although his Chinese accent is very strange, Kai can still understand it. Especially his sentence "Please bless me, Buddha" is very funny. In short, O'Connor is very familiar with Benny, and it took almost no effort to get his old background. Benny is a soft bone, and he will say anything if he is hit twice. But no one expected that Benny's revelations would be so shocking. It turned out that when he ran to the end of the mausoleum, he was caught by Imhotep. At that time, he thought he was going to die, but he spoke Hebrew in his nonsense. This language was spoken by slaves in ancient Egypt. The ancient Hebrews were slaves of the ancient Egyptians until Moses led the Hebrews out of Egypt, so Benny survived, and Imhotep needed a slave to help him. Imhotep promised to give him countless gold and silver treasures as a reward afterwards. From Benny, I learned that if Imhotep wanted to be fully resurrected, he must have a sacrifice. And the sacrifice was the unlucky ones who were cursed, the 3 American buddies and Professor Allen. He needed to get the holy urn, the jar for the internal organs when making mummies, and their lives and blood from the 4 of them. He took Burnseyes and tongue for this reason. In the spirit of being idle, O'Connor beat Benny again and continued to interrogate. It turned out that this guy had more material. In addition to the 4 Americans, Imhotep also wanted Evelyn. He wanted to use Evelyn as a sacrifice to resurrect his lover, and Sunamu, the wife of Pharaoh Seti 3,000 years ago. Imhotep was found to have an affair with the pharaoh's wife, and Suna, abbreviation, and murdered the pharaoh after being discovered. This led to him being sentenced to insect bite, that is, being locked alive in a coffin, and then being bitten to death by insects very slowly. A very romantic way to die. But the sequelae are terrible. Just like now, once resurrected, it will harm the world. Since he wants Evelyn and these 4 unlucky guys, it's easy to deal with. We will lead him directly to Hamunada and kill him there. Kai happily decided to use Evelyn and the others as bait. Although the 3 Americans were not very willing, they had no say. Evelyn was very enthusiastic, but she made O'Connor and her brother Jonathan very angry, and they had no time to hide. But Evelyn agreed, and Kai's gang didn't seem so easy to talk to, so they could only risk their lives to accompany the gentleman. The most important thing now is to find Dr. Allen. Afu. Have you got any news yet? Kai said. No. We found Dr. Allen's residence, but he didn't come back. Our people have deployed defenses nearby. Once he shows up, we will bring him back immediately. Afu didn't look like a man who was just 20 years old. He was very calm and capable. Well, maybe we should participate in this deployment. After all, there's Gregory. If the Book of the Dead is still in Dr. Allen's hands, the Russian will definitely go to find him. Just as Kai finished speaking, someone knocked on the door. The one who came was the intelligence officer who briefed them last time, and with him came a dried corpse that was carried in. We were a step too late. The poor American was found by the mummy and Gregory at the same time. We wanted to save him, but there was no need to say anything extra. This unlucky guy was so lucky that he met Imhotep and Gregory at the same time. It was a wonderful death. Both parties were not easy to deal with. What about the Book of the Dead? Kai asked. The good news is that Gregory didn't get the book. The bad news is that the mummy got a book. The intelligence officer has a good sense of humor. Oh, and I don't know if it's good or bad news. The mummy and Gregory fought over the book. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like, Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.